Good evening and welcome to the Wednesday, June 12th, 2013 meeting of the Falmouth Conservation Commission. First item on the agenda are requests for continuance under a notice of intent. James Lucio, lot 532 Acapesket Road, East Falmouth, for permission to construct a new 4-bedroom single-family house with attached garage, deck with stairs, to install a retaining wall, Title V sewage disposal system, dry wells, driveway, French drain, utilities, and the associated clearing, excavating, grading, and landscaping.
Yes, Madam Chairman, the applicant is requesting a continuance in June 26th.
So move.
Second.
Any questions on the board? Any questions from the audience? Okay, motion on the table is a continuance to June 26th. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstention? Unanimous, so moved. Next is the Comcast at the end of, on Surf Drive at the end of Mill Road. This is the one we've had continued a number of times before, but it will still be continued because they're not quite ready yet.
At the last meeting, first of all, Madam Chairman, the applicant's requesting a continuance until July 10th.
Okay.
Second of all, at the last meeting, they were just finishing the process of the Cape Cod Commission.
Right, and that's why.
Yeah.
On request of the applicant, I move till July 10th.
Second.
Any questions on the board? Any questions from the audience? Okay, all in favor of the motion on the table, which is a continuance to July 10th, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Unanimous, so moved. Minutes of March 27th, Jen's going to check on that. Minutes of June 5th.
Yes, Madam.
Court.
Yes, Madam Chairman, I've read the minutes from June 6th, or June 5, rather, and find them in order with one exception on page 5. About 3/4 of the way down the page, it says M returned. Now, we all know that that's Mario, but some outside reader isn't going to know that. So I move that with the suggestion that we change that to Mario Di Gregorio, that we accept the minutes as written.
Second.
Any questions? Other corrections on the board? All in favor of accepting the minutes of June 5th with that very minor change, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Unanimous, so moved. Request for hearings under a notice of intent. No RDAs today.
No.
All hearings of the Falmouth Conservation Commission are heard simultaneously under the authority of the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act and the Falmouth Wetlands Bylaw. Although a single decision is issued, it represents a separate decision under each authority. First, tonight is Linda Joffrey, Carol
Jeff
White.
Roy.
Pardon me?
Jeff Roy.
Roy, Carol Weinberg, Philip and Elizabeth Groth, 63 and 55 Girard Avenue and 20 Wheeling Avenue for permission to manage the beach, which includes installation of seasonal fencing to spread and regrade sand, trapped by fencing to screen, clean, and minor grade of sand, and associated clearing, excavating, grading, and landscaping. Jen.
Yes, Madam Chairman, I'll save any of my comments until after Mr. Borselli's presentation.
Madam Chairman, members of the board, my name is Michael Borselli from Falmouth, Mass. I represent the applicants. I'm also joined in the event by Brian Wall, who represents the applicants, and one of the applicants, Elizabeth Gross, is in the audience as well. We're here tonight seeking permission to do a typical beach management process similar to beach management applications you've seen in the past. Properties. There's 3 specific private properties with private beachfront. The Jeff Roy property, which is the most easterly. The middle property is owned by the Weinbergs, and then the more westerly property is owned by the Grosses. And the beach faces south onto Nantucket Sound, just west of the entrance of Falmouth Harbor. What the application proposes is to have permission to do typical screening, raking, and regrading of the upper beach areas above knee-high water on a seasonal basis. Historically, there's been no protective fencing, seasonal fencing installed. We're proposing to install seasonal fencing on the beach, and we went by the guidelines of coastal zone management for the type of fencing system. And the concept is to install the fencing on the beach after the summer season. If you make reference to the notes in the upper right-hand corner of the plan, one says at the end of each season, on or about October 1st, fencing will be installed as shown, and then on or about mid-May, May 15th, the fencing will be removed. And then, after removal of the fencing, the sand that had collected in the different sections of fencing would then be redistributed along the beach. There's also a proposal to put a row of fencing along the existing concrete wall that is effectively the boundary of the yards of the three properties upland of the beach. And that fence would be taller than the existing concrete wall, so that the idea is the sands that blow through will be trapped by the three different lines of the fence, and it'll be, some passes through to the next fence, some passes through to the next fence, so it doesn't all build up like it has in some years up against the concrete wall in one place, and then it's more difficult to respread it on the beach. So there's actually two sawtooth configuration fences that are seasonal on the beach. One fence along the edge of the wall, all to be installed in the post-season in the fall, and then removed just before the season, summer season, and then the balance of the permit requests that we be able to spread that sand all above knee-high water. We also would expect, and we put a note, that we would notify Conservation Commission staff prior to doing any beach management activities, so that they know that if someone calls, that they have a permit.
Something that hasn't always been done in the past, isn't that correct?
Correct. So the construction access, we have a couple of options for construction access. We may reserve the right to change the access. It currently is shown on the plan to go through the Jeffroy property, but there's also an opportunity to have it come between Weinberg and Jeffroy. And there's no impediments or trees or anything in the way in either location. With that said, I'm here and Brian's here to answer any questions.
Okay, Jen?
Okay, Madam Chairman. First of all, the board should be aware that on May 19th, I received a call from the director, the acting director of Natural Resources. It was a Sunday afternoon that the applicants before you tonight were conducting beach maintenance activities without a valid permit. That came into my...
Could you explain that a little further? What that...
Just the director, acting director of Natural Resources and another resource officer observed activities and the spreading of sand along the beach.
That included a bobcat on the beach?
Actually, when I
Or
double-checked,
some sort of a
there was activity on the beach. I'm not...
wheeled vehicle.
I'm not exactly sure what I haven't gotten an official report from Director Martinson yet, but I will get that to you.
But one of the pictures he showed you showed
I do have the pictures that he...
tire track marks.
Yes, I do have those pictures. That said, the applicants are before you because in 2011, the three properties were issued an enforcement order for unpermitted beach activities that included on the Gross property and the Jeffroy property, the alteration of a coastal dune. In those enforcement orders, the board requested that the applicants come before you with a beach maintenance program. So That is being done tonight. It's a good thing that the application is before you, but staff does have some concerns, a few concerns with the plan before you and the application. Mike, one of the things is on the gross property. The enforcement order states that we needed to see the extent of the altered dune and have that restored, and I don't see that on this plan, so that will need to be included in this plan because it's really unfair to ask this board to permit activities when that hasn't been addressed and the coastal dune is in basically part of that coastal system there. So that will need to be shown on the plan, as well as where you have an area of planted beach grass, again on the gross property. I'd say basically west of where you have that deck labeled, that's a dune. I mean, it's clearly a dune out in the field. You can see it in the photos. So I'd like to see that relabeled a bit, and also I'm concerned with the installation of this proposed solid seasonal fence that you have in that area, because you have it extending past that deck area, so you're going right into that dune area with that fence. So we may need to go out in the field and take a look at that and modify that location. Also, can you tell me a little bit about your solid seasonal fencing? And is it snow fencing, or is it a solid structure, or?
It's proposed to be solid in that it'll either be made of like cedar fencing, like the tightly pickets that are tightly spaced along, so it's a solid barrier, or it may be filter fabric.
Basically, you don't want sand to go beyond the fencing, so it is a solid
It's
structure.
solid, and
Okay.
its intent is to keep sand from blowing up. The sand builds up at the base of the wall, and then it starts to blow up and over onto the properties.
Okay. Well, you know that we've had discussions in the past about the snow fencing on the beach, so let's go back to there. I'm glad to see you did that in the sawtooth pattern and worked with the guidelines of the publications that I gave you to look at. That said, I think some of the board has concerns with the one closer to the water line. Maybe we could stagger them a bit, I'm not quite sure, instead of just having the solid line of fencing. Just because of the coastal storms and everything, you want to make sure that this doesn't become debris coming out, so we may want to take a look at that on that case. The Weinberg property, really don't have any concerns, although the board is going to have to discuss the solid fencing there. And also, again, over on the Geoffroy property, we do know there is a pending litigation regarding the enforcement order that the board had issued, but we want to make sure that nothing there, again, you know, we need to show the extent of the dune. The Campion property as well was affected by that, and that dune had come over onto the Geoffroy property. So, you know, I wanted to see an extent of that as well. That solid fencing, Mike, real quick, does that jog down towards the water?
Yes, as a matter of
Okay.
fact, it's jogging at a point so that it is not in the area that is currently under enforcement. The dune that was altered in 2011, we show this fence. This fence is in a position so it's not near that, it's not on that dune, it's next to that dune.
The one that comes down perpendicular to the water line?
This one, yes.
What's the purpose of that? I mean, if you're building up sand, you can naturally build up this affected dune on the east.
It's really a limit of work so that the same thing doesn't happen again. If they were to get a permit to do the beach management, it's a way to make sure that if you were to grant a permit, that the bobcat doesn't get too aggressive and get too close to that
Okay.
land.
Okay. And do you know who the contractors were that did the work about a month ago? Your
don't.
client is in the audience, so maybe they could shed some light on whom they hired to do that work.
Well, I don't know, but what I can tell you is this, I became aware of this from Mr. Jeffroy, and I went to the property, and I interviewed Mr. Jeffroy. All that work was done by hand.
Okay.
Wheelbarrows and men. And it was only done in front of the Jeffroy property. Granted, he did not get permission to do it, but it was built up to such an extent on that wall, he basically pulled it back from the wall and then hand raked it back and took some wheelbarrows and like spot dropped them and then raked it in front of this lot only. I don't know who the workmen were,
Okay,
and I don't know that Mrs. Gross knows.
okay, I just, we're all together again, going through the properties, so. Madam Chairman, I'm gonna pass this down, this is Chuck's email that he sent me,
Okay.
and after looking at it, he does says he only observes signs of hand use, but you can look at the photos and make a
Okay.
determination. And then these photos were taken this afternoon after I spoke with you. I just went out there and snapped a few photos, and just to get a better idea of, Mario, your concerns out on the Gross property and that primary dune, which you are correct in your assessment that is a primary dune. And the installation of that proposed solid fence, I do have some concerns with in that area west of the deck. That little yellow deck that you have, again, perpendicular to the wall. West of that, it's all built up dune, planted beach grass, it's beautiful. East of that, the board will need to make a determination on that. And those are my only comments right now, Madam Chairman.
Okay, Tommy? Any questions?
I'd like to see Chuck's letter first and those pictures before.
Okay. Courtney, any questions?
Photos right there.
Couple of things. Did the contractor doing the handwork that we have pictures of have an okay from the commission to do that?
No, Courtney, they did not.
Thank you. Second of all, I'd like to know I want you to describe your solid fence a little bit more.
Could you just
You've just said a solid fence. Well,
It might be silt fencing,
no,
Courtney.
I don't want to know what it might be. I want to know what you have in mind.
We would propose to put posts, timber posts every so often, 6 to 8 feet on center in sections, so there'd be sections of fence. And in between the posts, it would either be a series of tightly installed pickets, like a picket fence without really very big gaps. Or it might just be a solid fabric, or a silk fence fabric.
How deep are you going to put the posts?
The posts are going to be installed on the seaward side of the concrete wall, which is about the wall is 2 feet tall, and the post would be installed in the ground approximately 24 inches, just driven in with a sledgehammer.
Personally, I have a bit of a problem with that. You're looking at a dynamic coastline, storm action and so forth. And, a solid fence is just gonna get blown away. And, I even am concerned about doing stuff like snow fencing, but at least snow fencing will capture some stuff.
Yeah, spread it out.
So I could buy that, but that's as far as I'm gonna go, personally, on this commission with you. And if this gets before us to be deliberated on and so on, I can tell you straight up, I'm gonna vote against that. The most I would permit would be snow fencing.
We would listen to the expertise of the commission if they have a recommendation for something other than solid against that wall.
Yeah, let's,
I just-
we can circle back, or when you come back with an amended,
I
but,
mean,
But that's Courtney's view, and now we'll go down the
Yeah, I
board.
just want to finally finish with a point that, we had an enforcement order on this whole property. And I thought that's why we're hearing this now. And obviously, I agree with Jen, the dune needs to be restored. Any dunes those have to be restored. And so it's a little troublesome to me, honestly, when I read this report, that the same people, without permission, are out there fussing around on the beach again. Even if it's maintenance, they didn't have the courtesy to come to the commission to ask. And that's troublesome. And so you're putting yourself, in my mind, on the wrong foot. Makes it harder for me to be dispassionate in my judgment. I have no other questions.
Mario?
I have to echo Courtney's remarks. Mike, on the west side, the dune delineation is incorrect, okay? You have it as edge of beach grass, planted beach grass, as if that somehow or other disqualifies it as part of the coastal dune system, right? Why do you say that? I mean, it looks like a perfectly functioning dune to me.
Okay.
So I think we need a better delineation on the west side.
Looks like a good dune.
I'm sorry?
It looks like that's your front yard. It looks great.
Yeah,
It's beautiful.
yeah.
It's been the same for 5 years.
It's a fully
Yeah, it
functioning
looks good.
part of the
Very
coastal dune
beautiful
system.
property.
So, obviously, you've got dune systems on the east and the west that are sort of, dunes just don't end at property lines, There's got to have been some manipulation of the original coastal dune. Now, I know some of this is probably grandfathered. I, too, am wondering, the only reason for that solid fence is to prevent dunes from migrating into the lawn area, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Why isn't that, when dunes migrate laterally, as you know, so how is that not impacting dune function by putting that fence in?
There's already
There's a little retaining wall,
Right.
but we're talking about something a little more substantial than that, right?
well, I'm not an expert on dunes, Mr. DiGregorio, but all I can tell you is, yes, sand would migrate onto the lawns if not managed in some way. And the property owners have grown accustomed to having lawns and would like to continue to have the property maintained the way they've been maintained for several years. So the fence against the wall just makes it so more sand would have to accumulate to a greater depth before it went onto the lawn.
But you would be impeding the lateral movement of the dune by putting that fence up.
Yes, we would. It has been impeded for a very long time.
Mr. DeGore, if I could address that question or comment that you had a second ago.
Brian, you have to tell us who you are.
For the record, Brian Wall, I'm the attorney, I represent the applicants in this case. The area where the seawall is sort of the stone, the concrete wall, there are certain areas that are meet the definition of dune, but in this large area, it's coastal beach. And although sand migrates on the coastal beach, unless there's a hill, mound, or ridge of sand, it's not dune. And that's why we think that we can put the fence where we're proposing it and maintain the coastal beach where it is. The definition of coastal beach is that it runs seaward from the seaward side landward until it hits a dune or a man-made structure. And so that's why this wall has been there since at least the 40s, according to what the code claims. The other thing I wanted to say too is that we've modeled this application after other permits, beach management permits that the commission has issued, and we've proposed conditions that are consistent with other permits that we've issued.
Except for the solid fence.
Except for the solid
And we're
walls.
still listening to comments, and we will ask for a continuance and come back with something to address that.
Okay. Just
So-
want to make sure that you,
So really, the dune is trying to reclaim probably the original location of the dune itself, which is now supplanted by football field-sized lawns.
Well, there's a long history here which we're trying to avoid getting into, and we're trying to focus on the beach management plan as we're shown.
I've got no
There was-
problem, Brian, with the beach management. I think snow fencing's fine. Why do you think you have to have a tracked vehicle on there to redistribute the sand when wind and wave could do much the same without bringing a tracked vehicle onto the beach?
The proposal is for a small rubber-tired vehicle.
Bobcat? Bobcat? Why?
Well, again, we're here, we're open to comments from the commission. The commission wanted to put a condition that said it could only be by hand. That's something that we can.
The why is it's simply a manpower labor issue. The town of Falmouth has machines on their beaches, grading and smoothing out beaches. It's this practice. It's common practice to use a small, low PSI vehicle on scene to make the labor easier. It's more efficient. That's the.
But, I mean, by redistributing the sediments on the coastal beach, what are you trying to do? I mean, wouldn't wind and wave redistribute the grains?
Trying to redistribute it in a way that allows it to maintain uniform and flat for the purposes of recreational uses, which is what all the town beaches are used for. And this is a very similar situation as any of the town beaches.
Well, one other concern I have, I don't mean to hammer you here, but those lawns are very green. They're emerald green, and they go right to the edge of the coastal beach. It seems to me that emerald green lawns take a lot of fertilizer, which in turn we could be looking at some nitrogen entering the harbor from those lawns. I'd be looking for some mitigation planting along the edge of those lawns, maybe a 20-foot strip of beach grass, beach plum, whatever, to try to at least take up and filter some of that nitrogen. Nitrogen's a real problem in our embayments now, so there's no way that is not a source of nitrogen.
Well, I can tell you that the applicants, all three, would be resistant to such a condition. They've maintained these lawns for decades. This waterfront is not an embayment. It's a highly dynamic water body that has significant flushing, and the dilution rates, if any nitrogen were to enter this water body, would be immediately diluted. It's not like it's on one of the coastal embayments. This is on the Union Sound and a direct in a velocity zone.
So they would not be amenable to any kind of mitigation planting.
No, in fact, what they're trying to do is to try to take the proper steps to manage the beach in a way that you would expect them to, so that they are not doing any illegal activity, but not at the risk of having further conditions about other limitations on the property.
Well, I'm with Courtney. I think as it stands now, I couldn't vote for this. I could vote in favor of the beach nourishment fencing, but as far as bringing a tracked vehicle onto the beach, I see no reason for that. They don't want to mitigate for the lawns. At least let's get the dune systems down correctly.
Okay, I
That's
think
all I said.
they got those messages. Tom?
Good evening. I was there the other day, walked by, and I'll be honest with you, I didn't think about what happened 2 years ago. I was looking at this on face value. This was something the commission had asked for. Beach management plan. If I lived in that home, or in one of those homes, I would want to address that for recreational beach. I can understand every motive that you have with this. However, when I get here, and I hear about the activities that were unpermitted, again, it calluses whether it was someone just spot this, that, and the other. This is a highly sensitive area as far as attitudes go. I become suspect of any intention that's in front of me. Mike made the comment about wooden stakes going in X amount of feet apart. And on the plan, install snow fence with galvanized steel pipes driven in 18 inches minimum into the beach surface. It's a minor little difference between a wood stake 2 feet in, galvanized 18. This property is full of minors, little things. The conservation staff shall be notified 10 days prior to spreading and grading activities. I am very suspicious of that. Because of the activity on May 19th, I have Chuck's letter. Whether it's a little bit, they're all connected. If it wasn't your party that was involved in it, and it was somebody else that dragged you into the chocolate quagmire that this is gonna end up being, so be it. Sand that has accumulated against the fencing shall be spread and graded using a rubber-tracked, low-contact pressure loader. That only works if you use it as a low impact. And I deal with that issue every single day. In very dramatic ways. You know, if you have a piss-poor operator in that machine and they get onto this site, it just complicates everything. You would be better off with a half dozen men and doing it by hand if you have a poor machine operator. All right? Monitoring this over the storms in the winter, these are seasonal homes, I believe. I think Mr. Jeffroy's is year-round, but I think the other two are seasonal homes. You're right. Okay.
It is.
Okay, but monitoring that, there'd have to be something after storm events. I'd be particularly concerned about, again, we've had massive debates about storm panels, breakaway panels, and you got over 1,000, my look at it, was over 1,000 lineal feet of snow fence and solid fence proposed. And I really wasn't, I'm jaded, I'll be perfectly honest with you. If that information, May 19th, hadn't been spoken about, I truly went into this without any chips on my shoulder. And I don't want to have a chip on my shoulder, but it's hard for me to ignore multiple infractions if that is the case. A beach management plan is what we wanted, that's what is proposed. I think a vast majority of this, I'm gonna stay away from the dune areas because that's other people's expertise. At the top of that wall, I don't see a solid piece in there. I don't see it. I think that's, you're catching that drift. The other part of it, the CZM type management with the snow, I really think that done correctly would give you a nice recreational beach area, which I can truly understand. It's the outside corners I'm gonna leave to my fellow board members, but the activities on here, I'm very suspect of having a machine out there, because first off, it may not be necessary. If this is placed in and done out, and these are just islands or windrows, truly, a 36-inch loom rake, you can do an awful lot with a good crew, and it's just not an issue. It becomes a non-issue. And I would really like to look forward to a non-issue on all these properties. Truly, I would. Thank you.
Mike?
I think you're putting in something like more than 100 fence posts, if you will. The notion they're not going to be blown away kind of bothers me, particularly if you're talking about something solid in between, 2 feet into sand, and it just seems that all the stuff may end up in somebody's backyard or someone's resource area. But the notion of protecting the property and prevent, like, keep the sand as we asked for. It seems very reasonable to me. I think that the devil is in the details, and whether that is a filter fabric that can tear rather than be blown around or how it works.
You hear that loud and clear.
Tommy?
I think a lot of my concerns have been addressed here. I would say it's nice to see that the owners are getting the message. That's why this is followed, and they're trying to avoid the sand moving up against that wall in the first place, so it doesn't have to be excavated back off the lawn, which I imagine is what's been happening over the years. I think bigger spacing in the fences is a good idea, and I think if it's set up right, Tom's right, that you can do it by hand, and if we can keep the bobcat off the beach there, then there's no danger of people getting too carried away, which would be a good thing. And I'm willing to go for it with those minor changes.
I have some questions, Mike. You have something that's labeled record water line. Does that mean high water?
Now, record water line is the water line that is on the original record plans that are referenced in the deeds to show you whatever year that plan was created. Whenever that survey was done, that's where the surveyor at the time determined what the water line to be. Mean high water.
Oh, it's lower than that, I see.
Mean high water is.
I
what
see-
we've
I see
measured
your mean high
recently.
water.
So it shows a difference, and surprisingly, it's not much of a difference.
Well, I'm really surprised that it shows it, the difference that it does. You would expect it to show the opposite.
It's showing it seaward versus landward.
Yeah, but it just depends on how much sand was caught onto that beach.
Yeah,
I mean,
that specific area, like we saw this winter, a lot of these are built up.
Right, so it may have been a beach that was more eroded in the past, who knows?
Yeah, perhaps the jetties to Falmouth Harbor were not there when the record water line.
Right, right. On your plan, on the Jeff Roy side, where you have that line down, is that one of the places you were proposing to have a permanent fence? Or-
I'm not saying now, no.
But yeah, before, Mike, when I asked you for that perpendicular, you did say it was gonna,
I would expect that to be snow fence. The theory was that was gonna be basically a few.
Well, you know, I'll tell you what my concern with snow fence would be. I understand what you're trying to do, and you're trying to maintain the beach and maintain lawn where lawn can be maintained. There's still a question out on that for part of the lawn. I understand all that, but there is a dune to the, where is it? To the east. And part of that sand, part of the sand that blows in should be allowed to continue to build up on that dune. And in fact, there's a chunk of that dune that is missing due to activities that happened 2 years ago.
True, and what you're saying is very true, because what happened 2 years ago, as bad as it was, if you go there now, what you're describing is exactly happening. That dune has naturally built itself.
That's what dunes do.
Because that dune is actually a barrier to sand. I mean, so it
traps it.
But
Yep.
if that were, even as snow fence, there's gonna be some pass-through. It was, the concept was to make it like a limit of work.
Right, well,
we got that.
we'll come up with a new limit of work concept, but, you know, part of the way these systems work, and that's a nice dune. Mike was just pointing out to me today when we were out there what nice animal habitat it provided. And so I think we're gonna let that dune continue to do what it's supposed to do. Let's see, I think I had. Yeah, and my only other comment, I was gonna ask you, and apparently you weren't involved, but Mr. Jeff Roy, Courtney, Jeff Roy,
Jeffrey.
either himself or got people to do the work in this area. But what I want to ask you is, what is it that Mr. Jeff Roy doesn't understand about doing work in that area? About permission and doing work? Can you answer that?
You'd have to ask me. I can answer that partially. I firmly believe that doing work by hand, the way he did, he believed was passive, not impacted, and could be done.
Can you tell me what this fence is that's in this picture?
I'm talking about, you know, the raking and the.
Yeah, but I'm asking about the fence.
Oh,
Is that an authorized fence?
if it's there, if it was there, it wasn't authorized.
The way that I'd like to answer that question is that the idea of this application is to put a permit in place so that the property owners know what they can do, that it complies with your regulations, that the staff and the commission knows what can be done and what can't be done, and where the off limits are, and that notice provisions are given so that the commission is aware when work is going to be done.
Okay, and we appreciate that, but would you please specifically talk to this applicant, the other, not to the other two applicants, but to this applicant?
Yeah, I want to make clear that the Grosses didn't participate in that. And there was a comment earlier about some tracks on the beach. That was 2 years ago. But I think the idea is we're here today looking prospectively to try to put controls on the beach so that everyone knows what they can do and all the activities comply with the law.
Madam Chair.
Court. Wait a second, Jeff.
Just to follow up to what you're saying, I certainly appreciate it, and certainly the Jeff Roys are well represented by your council, and they're well represented by Mike. But they need to understand what they can do. And it shouldn't really be filtered. I don't know how that occurs, but it's very troublesome to me, and I think you've heard the same message from my fellow commissioners, that somehow they don't seem to understand that when they're working in a delicate resource area, they should find out what they can and cannot do before they do it.
Right.
To do it afterwards, unfortunately, smacks of arrogance, and it colors our opinion. Thank you.
I would hope that it wouldn't color your opinion because you are sworn as commissioners to act impartially on the application before you.
Correct, but it's very hard for us to do this when we're getting it thrown in our face. Thank you.
Let me just simply respond for anybody saying something simple. That the application that's before the board now is at the recommendation of myself and Mr. Verselli. The clients have agreed to do this. And so again, I want to look perspectively.
Madam Chairman,
Okay, and we're gonna circle back to you because we're gonna have a continuance.
Right.
I just need to make a few comments and bring up something that I didn't bring. Brian, we're glad your applicants came, but it was in their enforcement order to come before with a maintenance plan, just so that we could avoid, what happened a month ago. So staff is happy to see it. Like I said to you earlier this week and last week, they're just the little quirks. One thing that I forgot to mention earlier is on the Joffroy property, you have status of area subject to pending litigation. If you measure the limits of the dune that is being litigated right now, the one that the board issued the enforcement order, it actually extends farther out, so that red line area doesn't really show the extent of what it did on the older plan. So I'd like to see that it comes out like 30 feet. So like the last two posts and the slats that you have on your proposed solid fence kind of go into that area that's still being, litigated. So I think one of the things I wanted to talk to you about prior to this hearing was taking that area and where that fence goes perpendicular, kind of move that out, and because this area is still being,
Just so that I'm clear on what you're talking about, are you talking about seaward of the seawall?
no. If you look at Mike's plan, and I don't know if you can see, is the red line on your plan, Mike? The little area?
Yep.
Okay, that area is, if you look at the old plans on that area, that's in, and I don't want to say question because the board made the determination that there was a dune there that was removed. If you look at the old plans, that dune area was actually larger than what that red line is showing.
Landward of the seawall?
No, kind of west.
Right, but I'm just talking about.
Yeah, landward of the seawall, yes. But again, we don't know, seaward of the seawall, that was all part of that. So what I'm saying is, in order to evaluate this, we're gonna have to kick this fencing out a bit. You see what I'm saying? Because that area is still in
Yeah.
flux,
Could you
not
please
flux, but it's
indicate
still
on the
being
map that comes
litigated.
in where the dune in question, the dune that was on the map in 1992, that
Right, well,
disappeared, part of it disappeared where there's lawn, and part of it disappeared outside that was taken away by the Bobcat 2 years ago. Could you indicate all that disputed dune area?
let me respond by saying the following. First of all, let me just clarify the status of things. There were enforcement orders issued on all three properties.
Mhm.
All three property owners
Correct.
exercised their right of appeal. There was a remand where we came before you with new information,
Mhm.
and that essentially resolved all the issues as far as the Weinbergs were at issue in the middle. There was one or two issues remaining on the gross property regarding the extent and location of an alleged dune, and there was an issue that remained on the Joffroy property, which we're talking about
Mhm.
right now. As I said, Weinberg's resolved. The Grosses at some point decided it was no longer in their interest to continue the appeal and accepted the enforcement order, and that needs to be addressed, and Jim brought that to our attention, and the applicant intends to address that.
Mhm.
The Joffroy appeal is still pending, and so our simple intent on that was the issue as to whether or not there's a dune, and I know the commission feels very strongly about that, but it's still in play in court. And our intent was very simple, to note that it's there, that it's in litigation, and that if the Joffroys prevail, then it will be lawn, and if they don't prevail, then the enforcement order will kick in. And so I don't.
That's fine, but on
That's
this,
not what
on
I'm
this,
saying,
on this, when you come back for a continuance, please indicate the area of dispute. This is not the whole area.
Okay, we did, but what I'm simply trying to say is that it's still in dispute, and so the extent of the area and the nature and status of the area is all in dispute, and I don't think it's in play in this particular application. And anything the board does in this application is not going to affect this area that's shown on the plan.
I understand that, but as long as you're gonna say status subject to pending litigation, we would like the extent of the area that's subject to pending litigation.
Mr. Verselli thinks it's the right size. We'll consult with staff. Maybe I could solve it the simple way. The enforcement order said that the commission determined that a dune existed there and that its scope was as shown on that 1992 plan. Is what you're saying? That's simply show the same line as the 1992 plan? We can do that.
That's not what the staff is saying. And I appreciate everybody trying to, and Ron, we'll work through it during your continuance, and I'll explain to you what exactly I want to see on this plan. It's nothing big, it's just to take the activities that you're proposing out of the disputed area and move them west so that area still has the ability to do it, and that's all I'm saying. So we'll discuss that during the continuance
With
time.
staff.
Yeah. I know what I'm trying to say. I don't think I'm making it very clear, and I think I'm getting people confused, so.
But you know what my concerns are.
I do, and I don't
All right.
want to be the dead horse and go around and around.
All right,
I do
all right,
understand
and it might be the same.
We're not trying to gain anything in this proceeding vis-à-vis the enforcement proceeding, but similarly, we're not not trying to lose any rights either. It's simply, we just wanted to show it as
And-
it's still disputed.
And
We
we're
understand
the
that.
same way.
Okay. We'll move
We
this
understand
out.
that. Thank you.
Madam Chair, because I want to, we're going back and
Where's my
forth here,
pen?
but I just want to make sure that I understand. I think the purposes of this order of conditions, while we may recognize that there's an area in dispute, I think I understand Jen correctly, and I would agree if I understand her correctly, that this order of conditions and the work proposed will be predicated on the 1992 dune line, assuming that that's where it's going to be. If the courts now rule differently, then we can amend the order. But we don't start out with the assumption that it's going to be modified other than what was ruled on. So this order, once you do what you're doing now and go back and get your contingents, then rewrite your proposal so that it assumes that the dune is where it was in 1992. That's all I see.
Thank you, Courtney, but I don't want the board to lose fact that even if, and we'll make the modifications to the plan that the staff would like to see, that these dune systems, as Mr. Di Gregorio said, are dynamic. They're constantly shifting.
No, I understand.
So you need to allow the movement, the lateral movement of the
Well, I
dune,
think-
and that's
I
what
think
I'm
both
saying.
ways
But we'll
we're achievable.
discuss it.
And if we don't have some concerns when
Trust
you
me,
come
the
back,
board will
we'll
be
express
happy.
them then. How's that? Okay.
Madam Chair,
What?
I would like the applicant to realize that the only reason that, there's a lot of favorable items on this, but this came to us not just as your lot, but all three. So the activities on one link this all together. This is not a review of just a singular, it is the three of them that is
I think
connected.
she recognized that.
Okay,
She was
and-
just like,
but I would also, make a motion for continuance.
well, we have to get a date.
Brian, in order for me to be able to meet with you and discuss some of the concerns that I have, I won't be able to do it till next week. So the 20, yeah, we're talking after the 4th, so we're looking at July 10th, just to give you guys enough time to put the plan together. Because I'm at a conference for the next couple of days, so. And that's why I couldn't get with you guys this week to discuss some of the issues.
On behalf of the,
So it would be July 10th, is that agreeable?
That would be fine.
Okay.
on behalf of the applicant, I move to continue this to July 10th.
Second?
If possible, if the contractor that would be, if they have a contractor of choice, if he could be at the next hearing, I'm not looking backwards, I'm looking forwards, whoever they contract, it would be nice to let them be in the audience so that they can see how the process is actually, all your efforts and the applicant's efforts, and just recognize how important it is for them to respond correctly.
I will look into that, Mr. Corvo, and if I may, just before I yield the floor, because I think Mrs. Gross would want me to say this. I understand what you just said, that the application came to you because of something that happened 2 years ago. But again, we're looking prospectively, and the application, as far as the Grosses are concerned, and not because of what Mr. Joffroy did or didn't do. The issue is that there are no property lines on the beach, and the applicants see this as a comprehensive beach management plan, rather than each of them coming before you with their own sawtooth fences. They thought it would be better to address it as a whole, and I can tell you, Mrs. Gross does not want to give in to what happened on May 19th without any permits, and I think that the board should be cognizant of that.
No, we
We
absolutely are.
we absolutely are.
All right.
And then, in my own way, I was trying to recognize,
Because I know what happened, and
Yep.
we're looking forward.
Yep.
By the
Just so
way,
you're
Fine.
aware, despite my concerns, Brian, I understand that. And I think the rest of the board
I've
does.
practiced before this board many times, and I believe that you do. I'm not suggesting you don't, but I just want to rebut some of the comments that were made, which I understand why they were made. We do have a DEP.
Yeah, they came in at 6 o'clock.
Yeah, but we're asking for a continuance.
No, I understand that.
Okay,
We have a
there's a continuance on the table to June
second.
10th.
July.
Motion and a
July-
second.
July
We
10th.
said we'd be brief.
There's a motion and a second on the table to July 10th. Are there any questions on the board? Any questions from the audience for further comment? Okay, all in favor of the motion on the table, which is a continuance to July 10th, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstention? Unanimous, so moved. Okay, next up, Molly Cornell, 37 Shapquit Bars Road off Chase Road, but actually it's off Nashawena Road where it turns into Quaker Road. 78, 88, and 100 Chase Road, West Falmouth, for permission to control and manage approximately 0.2 acres of invasive exotic plant species, common reed Phragmites australis, using herbicide application with follow-up monitoring reports and associated clearing and landscaping. Jen?
Yes, Madam Chairman, I'll save any of my comments until after the applicant's presentation.
Who's presenting this? Are you presenting it? Well, Dick, you gotta get up. Good evening, Dick.
Richard Payne, representing Molly Cornell. She's, let's say they're in the Mashapaquid Creek is quite a bit of marsh. And on the north side is Molly Cornell's property. There's also a piece of marsh that's owned by Salt Pond Area Bird Sanctuary. One of the major populations in Phragmites is on Mrs. Cornell's section of the marsh. There are two much smaller populations on the Salt Pond piece of marsh. There is one other section that's way down at the end, very thick, and we haven't been able to contact people that live in that house. So Molly has proposed to finance the control of all the Phragmites on her property and the Salt Pond property. We're using the same operator who's been used in almost all of the Phragmites control, Chris Colleton, he's using similar methods with 1C2, 2, 4. I think the proposal pretty much speaks for itself.
Okay.
Entertaining questions.
Okay, we'll see what questions people might have. Jen?
Dick, you said that Ms. Cornell is going to fund her property and the Salt Pond Area Bird Sanctuary's property?
Yes.
And what about the approval letters you have from 78 Chase Road, Michael Gabrielle, and the 88 Chase Road, Mr. Collins? Are
Well,
those properties going to be done too? Because I also did receive one, and 100 Chase Road, Mr. Austin, but I also did receive one from the Haywards that are not authorizing that. So where exact, are we going to do it on these other properties or just Salt
they're-
Pond and 37?
the only Phragmites is on 37 and Salt Pond.
Okay.
The others are abutters. It was, until I actually got into the backyard of one of them, it was not clear where the property line and where the Phragmites was.
Okay.
It's obvious there's a stone wall.
Okay.
Marsh is beyond that.
Okay, so
So
these
they're
other
just-
properties will not be,
Right, they're expressing their approval of the control, essentially.
well, they say control Phragmites work on my property, so, but you're saying there is no Phragmites on these properties?
Right.
Okay. I have no questions as long as it's done with Chris's same methodology that this board has seen multiple times in the past and has approved. Staff is good.
Okay, Courtney?
Who's doing the work?
Chris Paul.
Thank you.
Mario?
Jim, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. This man wrote a very influential study on Phragmites. And so I'm just going to ask you the obvious question. This is the invasive species and not the native
Native.
species.
Absolutely, yes.
It was a
We don't
pleasure
want
to
the
go out
native
to this
species
property.
to go away.
There's,
I hope you don't get poison ivy from it.
oh, well, I had, but, I did not meet the homeowner, but I did meet the neighbors, the Austins. And I traversed through bramble and poison ivy and met the swan that was sitting on its nest and,
Good one.
and had all the other little fun that goes along with irritating a male swan.
Yep.
The,
Did he bite you?
no, he was awesome. The property, I'm duly impressed with the stewardship this woman is presenting us. The neighbors spoke extremely fondly and highly of her, great praise. And it is gonna be a task, you know, but hopefully over the next 3 years, it can be something that'll really make a difference in there. And kudos to her for the stewardship of her property. She really does well.
To point out that she is a past president of the 300 Committee and a longtime board member.
Mike?
Is there a plan showing the extent of the work?
No. We did not get a formalized site plan.
Because I'm an engineer, and I stand there and I couldn't tell you where the weeds stop and where they start. And I want to be sure we're working on property that we're working on.
This is an aerial photograph with a proposal which shows the two minor populations on the Salt Pond property and the major population on Falmouth property. You're welcome to that tonight.
Well, that was in our,
That was in the packets.
it's in our package.
Mike's looking for more of a
Yeah.
plot plan
Yeah.
to show the extent.
No other questions?
No questions.
Betsy, just real quick, having been involved in a project that was sort of breaking ground on this same area in Little Sipawisset Marsh about 5 years ago, I can attest at how the marsh has recovered from the elimination of Phragmites. It's an ongoing process of maintenance, but the native grasses are coming back, the cattails are coming back, and it's a real restoration thing. And so I'm very pleased to see similar projects being initiated like this.
I think we're fortunate to be starting at an earlier stage than you people where there's still lots of part-time coming up in between the Phragmites.
Yeah. Where it was treated in Little Sipawisset Marsh, the Phragmites had been there so long that there was nothing else growing there. As a matter of fact, they give off toxins through the rhizomes, and that was so intense in one area that it's now 4 years, almost 5 years later, that the grasses are finally beginning to come back in. But it's taken that long to have the soil cleanse itself of it.
I have a question, Madam
Yep.
Chairman. Dick, you just said that there's a lot of native grasses in the area where you're doing. Then how are you not going to impact those with the spray herbicide that you're proposing to use?
Well, as Chris says in his proposal, his standard technique is where there's,
I understand what a standard technique is, but this board has always seen it in like a monoculture of,
Right.
as in Courtney's yard, a
So-
monoculture of Phragmites where there was nothing else.
I suspect that through most of this area, he will use the glove technique. But
Okay, we'll need to condition that.
You keep a cotton glove in the.
No, I understand
Okay.
the glove technique. I'm just
And it
saying.
does extend somewhat in the upland area of her property into some of the shrubs.
Okay,
And I think he'll use cut and drip for that.
okay.
And that was the methodology employed in Sipawisset Marsh too. It depended on whether.
It depended on what it was.
Yeah,
And that's the way it was
that can be in the condition. I want to make a comment, and that is, I appreciate the fact that Molly, I suppose, talk to many of your neighbors about it, because it's better that people hear about this ahead of time than just get noticed at the last minute.
Unfortunately, Madam Chairman, we actually, Courtney, may I see that iPhone, please? The iPhone, oh, there goes my chair wheel, it just fell. Dick, as of 6 o'clock, you did not have a DEP number, but let me check.
I got a call from Christine Odiaga, asking for more information on that.
Okay, so she hasn't issued it.
Yeah,
I was just
did
checking my email
The
to
management plan and
Actually,
the
she did
area
issue
code.
you a number.
she said she tried to.
Yeah, your number came in at 6:15, so we can close this hearing.
Make a motion to close and take it under advisement.
Second?
Here I go, Courtney.
Okay, Courtney, do you have another question?
No? I'm just-
Any questions from the, oh, I'm sorry, any other questions on the board? Any questions from the audience?
Yes, I have a comment, and it's perhaps, it's in support, but it's, I guess it's asking for certain conditions.
Sir, could you, I'm
Sir,
sorry,
yeah.
could you?
Am I close
Jen?
enough?
Yes, you are.
Okay.
Sir, you have to tell us who you are.
Mr. Hayward.
Thank you.
I live at 68 Chase Road in West Falmouth, and I abut the marsh that is marsh in question. And I was one also who was receiving one of the letters asking for support of it. Wayne was very kind and sent me a proposal, about 3 pages, which I then read through. And in reading it, I have certain concerns, which I expressed in the letter to him, and I don't know if you have a copy or not. I'd like to read it, just a couple of paragraphs.
Okay.
And I will submit it to you if you'd like.
Yep, we would like you to.
And what I said to Mr. Payne, thank you for sending me the proposed management plan, which I've now reviewed. Regretfully.
Could you speak up a little?
Yes, I'm trying. Maybe I need to be a little closer. I'm not sure where to.
Yeah.
Thank you for sending me the proposed management plan, which I have now reviewed. Regretfully, I, as a property owner of record for 65 Chase Road, West Falmouth, must respectfully withhold my approval of the plan as defined herein. While I share your concern regarding wetland invasion by pragmatic cost of other non-native grass species, I personally object primarily to environmental material grounds and widespread application of rodeo, roundup, or any other similar device phosphate-based widespread herbicide to the marsh in question. Being by definition a widespread herbicide, such application would expect to kill essentially all vegetation with which it comes in contact. As it formulated with this draft and is to be applied, wetland area can be expected to be carried well outside the impacted area, which, by my own observations, are geographically quite limited in the area. In addition, as the aquatic species residing in the marsh have been already badly degraded, I personally monitored the water currently in the area for the CBC several years by the extremely high nitrate levels introduced by the enforcement location of the West Mountain wastewater treatment plant discharge. The situation is just now beginning, hopefully, to be somewhat remediated by the recent planned operating changes. Introduction of additional aquatic method stressor, no matter how relatively less toxic, seems inappropriate here. Concerns also may express the literature regarding collateral damage to nesting virgin water birds, so species of which also frequent the area. My own preferred approach to removing the effects on water plants from my own portions already impacting wetlands by their selective cutting. Repeat this necessary technique, which I, of course, intend to continue. I am sorry not to be able to give my approval of the proposed eradication plan as because of the letters and fresh respect my own considerations and sincere position regarding this matter.
Okay,
Now, to which I might expand a little as a background. I read the proposal which Mr. Payne was very kind to send me, all 3 pages of it, and I will say that it strikes me as very broad. I think it may be more applicable, the proposal at least, to what perhaps was done or would be done elsewhere than what's being discussed here. It talks about motorized backpack sprayers, would be by way of cut and remove, cut and haul. I'm just actually, not even cut and haul from marsh to the driveway area, to dump the bag, pull back combination of mechanical winch and possibly pull with an all-terrain vehicle. The whole account of disposal, all that herbicide, impression is, and I've had some go back and forth, I've been way a lot with Mr. Payne on this matter, and he replies to me, one letter, I don't have everything here, unfortunately, I looked through my computer ago, but he says, because I was concerned about the disposal, how it would be disposed of, how it would be gotten off the marsh, if it's a motorized vehicle, I mean, all this, that sounds like some of the work might be destructive, or at least cause collateral damage to the house in such a limited area. So that's an acre where it is, might not be necessary. And then he writes back to me, because of the small quantity of dead stock and very light in nature, we carried out my hands out much everywhere, damage to marsh. Well, that's all fine, but my reply to him, and I guess my reply to the board, is, Dick, what you say seems to minimize the problem, which is variance with several points to the proposal itself. Since the proposal seems to be the controlling document, I'd have to go with that unless it was modified and so forth. So I guess I'm asking for.
Which we can do by conditions.
Yes, conditions beyond put on. I certainly don't like the idea of motorized vehicles. I don't like, it doesn't sound like you need a motorized sprayer, which dispenses the stuff all over it. You can do it by the different.
Yeah, there's.
Anyway, I'm suggesting that it be tightened and the proposal be looked at and modified, or asked for modifications, or at least conditioned appropriately to this particular application, rather than the broad proposal which it is. I understand you're relying on the good faith of the people involved and so forth, but as a document, I would feel better if it were structured forward with this.
That's right, and we will specifically condition it like that. It's a much smaller area than Courtney's area. And I, yeah.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. I didn't mean to take your time. I know it was busy.
Well, that's all right. Nope,
Thank you, Mr.
we
Hayward.
appreciate that.
To express.
Madam Chair?
Yes, you have
Yep.
something.
What is that? Let Dick respond and then.
Yeah, please.
May I clarify one of the points? I think Chris's intent is to carry the stuff to the edge of Molly's property, load it into these large bags, and then drag it up through Molly's property. And this has been discussed with her, we've got a route. Now, that's where the motorized vehicle would come in.
Just, you mean in the upland?
In the upland.
In the upland.
You know,
Right, and we'll specifically
condition that. The
condition it.
intent is nice, but, once you're out in the field, as I said, with the sprayer, so we'll condition it and we'll meet out with Chris prior to him doing the work.
Right, and also if there is a pathway
Yep.
through the upland, we'll just make sure that it's properly restored.
Mr. Hayward, can we have your email? I know we were sent a copy, if you don't mind.
Yes.
Oh, you gave it? Okay, thank you very much.
Table there.
No, I know
Yeah, and
Nancy
we'll put
had
it in our
sent me-
record.
Yeah.
Courtney?
And just to respond to Mr. Hayward's comments, and I think those are very legitimate concerns. And they were the same concerns that those of us involved in the project in the Little Sippawisset Marsh had. And having been through it and having experienced what this particular contractor did, he was very, very cautious about how he did what he did. And so, for example, he would not go on the marsh and do any kind of spraying if that was the appropriate method he was going to use in an area, if there was any wind or there was a high tide. In other words, he gauged it to the situation. And I suspect that he will follow some of the same cautionary things. And I think, as both Jennifer indicated and Betsy indicated, when we go to condition this, we'll make sure that that's written in.
In my reply, I meant to emphasize that I assume this will be properly done, but so long as it's properly conditioned, it's just nice.
Right.
Yeah, and that's, yeah, we have the same concerns.
Okay, do we have a motion and a second on the table?
Yes, we do. I'm ready to vote.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the table to close this hearing and take it under advisement. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Unanimous, so moved. We'll move on to, Tim's waiting very patiently there. James and Mary Catherine Mamory, 42 Brainerd Road, North Falmouth, for permission to demolish the existing house and construct a new single-family house with attached garage, decks, porches, patios, driveway configuration, installation of a retaining wall, stone steps, drive wells, Utilities, native mitigation plantings, maintenance of the existing subsurface irrigation system and associated clearing, excavating, grading, and landscaping. Jen?
Yes, Madam Chairman, I will save any of my comments until after Mr. Santos' presentation.
Kim, good evening.
Good evening, for the record, Tim Santos, representing the applicant. Also with me this evening is the applicant, Mr. and Mrs. Emery, the architect, Greg Jones.
Is that you?
Back here. The builder, Ralph Cataldo, and the landscape architect, Greg Villas.
Have you been, you all look familiar. Were you all at a different? But for a different piece of
You've seen
property?
Mr. Cataldo.
All right.
Okay. The property is located at 42 Brandon Road in North Falmouth. The resource area is on within 100 feet of the property on a salt marsh, bordering vegetated wetlands, dune, landscape, coastal stone flowage, and a coastal bay. Most of you are going to be familiar with the property. Back in 2005, previous owner came in for approval of the denitrification septic system that's located in the northeast portion of the site, footprint of the site. It's encased in the concrete chamber. More recently, we've been before you for modifications to the existing here, for the reconfiguration of the ramp approach, the installation of more piles. The board has since closed that hearing, which you can order conditions. So the Memories recently purchased the property, and in doing so, they're looking to demolish the existing home, construct a new home, rise terraces, as well as reconfiguration of the driveway and some mitigation plantings. When we originally met on site, we looked at different orientations for the home. The orientation shown on this plan is really the best orientation for both views as well as environmental issues. The existing home is approximately 20 feet off the eastern side of the top of the coastal bank. On the western side, it's around the same 20 feet. We've taken the home and kind of rotated it slightly and moved it back. So now the existing structure, or the existing house foundation will be 30 feet, 32 feet actually off the eastern side and 30 feet off the western side. The actual deck and patios are no closer to what the existing home is now. There's approximately 468 square feet of increased development than what currently exists. So in accordance with redevelopment regulations, we're proposing 1,410 square feet along this area of the property, as well as 2 mitigation trees that prevent the property. There are 2 existing trees located right up against the house. Those trees will need to come down during construction. So we're proposing to mitigate with 5 new 5 to 7 foot cedars along the eastern bank. They're actually closer to the resource area than what currently exists. The Memories would also like to improve the look of the resource area adjacent to the septic field, so we're proposing to replace some cedars that are either stressed or dead, add some new ones, as well as some tubelos in that area. All the roof runoff will be directed to subsurface leaching trenches as shown on the plan. We feel that this project meets the performance standards. We feel it's an improvement and there will be no adverse effect in any of the resource areas. If any of the board members have any questions of staff, either myself or one of the team members, we want to have a good
I think we do. But we'll start with Jen.
Okay, Madam Chairman, first off, and I should have said this before, you should all be looking at a plan dated June 10th. It would have been Monday.
Okay.
You're all looking at a plan, June 10th? It's been in your packets. The reason for that is, Mike, what plan are you looking at? The reason for that is,
Mine says May 24th.
okay, you had one in your packet. June 10th, right here. And the reason for that is, back in 2005, contrary to what Tim said, most of you don't remember that. The only 2 would be Courtney and Betsy, lucky you. when the septic system was installed, there was
I don't remember this, I must have been
a
away.
big back and forth over the wetland line because the area is completely mowed, so we were working off of hydric soils only. So what the change in the plan that from the May 24th plan to the June 10th plan was that staff asked for that wetland line based on hydric soils to be placed on the plan. Because we were concerned that the house was moving closer to a resource area in that A buffer. And the hydric soils, we would have had to have a discussion whether or not you felt that was a wetland. Tim pointed out the other day that the house is outside that A buffer, so it doesn't encroach. So that's a good thing. The only other concern the staff had, so that was staff's concerns were addressed in that respect, and the only other concern we had was with the plantings, and I did talk to Greg the other day when I met with Greg and Tim on, they had a list of plants, putting them in a wetland area, in a hydric soil area, will these plants
It's wet
survive?
today.
Yes, I know that. So, we talked about using appropriate species in these areas as well as when they redo around the raised septic system, because that does abut a dune area, and to be sensitive about where these plants are going, because we would not want the applicant to put in 1,500 square feet of mitigation only to have it die because it's not appropriate species for the area.
All of the mitigation, that big mitigation area,
Is in a
have to be
wetland.
plants who like their feet wet.
Yes, and we've discussed that, so we can condition that, but that was discussed on, when did I meet with you, Monday? Tuesday, Monday, something like that. So, so that was discussed. So those are really the only concerns the staff had. Mark did raise the concern about and Tom, maybe you could help me with this, the in-ground irrigation system. Tim picked up irrigation boxes in the driveway, but we were unable to locate any of the heads out, so I'm not quite sure if you did or not, Tom. So that's something that'll
Grass
have
was-
to be discussed, because, Rand's Canal, again, it's an embayment, and be kind of nitrogen sensitive, so I'd be concerned with any sort of excess nitrogen use in this area. But other than that, all of the staff's concerns were addressed.
Okay,
I like getting them addressed before the hearing.
yes, that's nice, isn't it?
Yes.
Courtney,
I have no questions.
Mario,
No questions.
Tom.
Two really nice, this weekend was banner for me when I went out to the site, because that little man house on the corner is like absolutely like the coolest thing. And it's a very nice location, and there's a lot of effort. I truly believe there was a lot of effort to manage this site and accomplish not just the aesthetics and such, but to be truly aware of their surroundings. I was fortunate enough to meet the homeowners when I was out there, and a brief discussion about what Phragmites is and their mitigation planting, and what's starting to intrude on that, and letting them be aware that, that's going to be a management thing from hither and yon. It is truly and I don't say this often, there's not many places I'd want to have to be in front of this board. I don't see the juice isn't worth the squeeze, but this really is a very nice spot. No other questions?
You didn't have questions. I can tell you I have questions.
I have to quote that.
Mike,
I have to write that one.
The area below the living space, is it going to be open?
It's a garage and storage area, but the architect's also here, if you want specifics on what's below there. It's in a flood zone, so there's no true living space down there, if that's what you're asking.
How is
Just
the
in an
wall?
A zone though, not a
Yeah,
B
correct.
zone,
A
yeah.
flood.
It's an easy.
Okay, good. First floor.
Oh, the wall, is it open space, or is it
Partially.
breaking?
It's not piles, it's a foundation supported.
If I may, to clarify for Mike, it's gonna look like a typical foundation and walls, but because of where it's located, it's not habitable space. You can use it for storage and others. It will have enclosed walls and fenestration, but it will not be a habitable space. And then there will also be, at some point, open space in the garage area under.
Okay.
And all the electrical has to be above a certain.
Above a certain elevation,
Oh,
Correct.
yeah.
Yep, and that's why it's not a habitable space.
not true living space.
Anything else?
No questions?
No questions.
Madam
Thank you.
Chairman, oh, sorry, when you're done, I have one quick question.
Okay, I have a couple of questions. It has to do with the septic system. The corner of the septic system in my plan, although it's not the June 10th plan, but I doubt you changed it, in the
The only difference is the adding of that hydrant. The only
hydric
difference,
soil,
that's the
yeah.
only difference.
And today, you wouldn't have even had to take an auger out to find out what was there. All you had to do was wear your boots around. Okay, the north corner of the septic system, you have lots of X's through. You want to move trees out a little bit, which,
I can explain that, if that's your question.
well, there's a pine tree there.
Currently, there's existing.
Not there, up there.
Yes, there are stressed cedars up in that corner.
And there's a pine tree.
I will let Greg speak to that exactly, but the trees that are gonna be removed in that area are trees that are either stressed or dead, so we're replacing them. We're not asking to remove trees specifically, what we're asking to do is replace the dead ones with the stressed ones.
How about the pine?
We're gonna try to work around anything that's existing. Rick Billows. We're trying to work around anything that's existing that's established. Anything that's stressed, it's going to be.
Going to replace one for one.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Because there are a lot of plants that look like they were neglected.
Yeah,
So,
but that pine is nice, and it looks as if,
The one that has the oak tree that's kind of weaved into it.
Right.
Yeah, that's right. And the idea was to try to preserve anything that has been established.
sort of the best established plant there.
Yeah, exactly.
Good,
Okay.
can you state your full name for?
Rick Billows, Village Associates.
Thank you.
Okay, my other question about that space is, it is a septic system, but it looks like you're taking a little path up, and it's gonna be sort of, what are you planning on putting there? I mean, right now, there are beautiful wildflowers in it.
Yeah, I know. There are some nice wildflowers. We're trying to establish a little lawn area there for a play area for our children.
Are you gonna keep the wildflowers?
So we're trying to maintain, actually.
If you wanna pass them, pass them off to other people,
The intention is to really, very naturalistic,
Yeah,
screen that concrete wall, to make it look, when everything is all said and done,
So you-
like, it's a planting that's very native in character.
so you're gonna just keep plants and maybe bring a chair or two up there, because you have a nice view out?
Correct, that's
Okay.
exactly right. Because
Okay.
right now, there's not really a lot of usable space in lawn area, there's not a lot of
Yeah,
usable
well,
space.
yeah,
very
it's a
limited.
great, yeah,
So it's really been a potential play area, lawn area.
yeah,
And we want to try to, really recapture that.
yeah.
Right
It
now,
is,
it's just
it
not
is really,
used.
yeah, it's a really good use of that
But
space.
the wildflowers are beautiful right now, they're really, really beautiful, just
Yeah.
in a nice moment.
Yeah, yep. The other spot where there's a lot of hydric soil is out towards the north of the house. And right now there's lawn, but you might want to put some, again, plants that like their feet wet. I mean, obviously, this is a really wet time, we've had a lot of rain and the water tables are high, but it's, other kinds of plants eventually aren't gonna like it there very long. I think that was it.
Madam Chair,
Court.
I'll move to close the hearing and take it under advisement.
All right.
Second.
1 second, please.
Well, we can have a motion and a second?
motion.
A motion and a second are on the table. Now we're gonna ask for further questions.
Mike. My question is for Ralph.
You have to come up,
You have
Ralph.
to come up, Ralph, I'm sorry.
You were
Has
selected.
to do with the 4-foot front
But he has to
wall
tell us who he is.
and the dewatering issues you might run into out there.
Hi, my name is Dr. Talbot. I tell the customer what we've done. I've been in front of this board for over 25 years, and so nobody's done that.
Sorry, Ralph, but,
I haven't been in jail, and I haven't been wanted. So far, so good.
I'm just kind of curious, do you have a dewatering plan if you run into, I mean, I personally know the groundwater in that area, I mean,
It's probably around 3.
okay, so you're gonna hit
We're
water.
expecting it. It's just like any other of these flood zones you know,
Yeah.
we're expecting it. You may even dig a couple of test holes, you know, just to play it safe. Do a little prep work, just to be sure, so when we do that. You know, Greg and I, the architect, spoke about that today.
Okay, you'll probably see a condition in the order of conditions that, prior to starting work, you need to put a dewatering plan in for us. Okay,
Yeah, no problem.
all right. I just wanted to make sure you were aware of that.
Yeah, we expected, I saw the
kinda figured you
existing
did.
grade over there, and I expected the water table to be around 3,
Yeah.
2.5, so it's about 6.5 now, so it's gonna be close. We can put it in.
Okay, just, as I said, just be, aware that that will be a condition that I'd want to see a more formalized dewatering plan prior to start of work.
No problem.
That should be easy enough for you to submit.
Is Greg the person who brought us a 3D? Yeah, see, now I expect it.
I was thinking about that today.
Yeah, yeah, and you knew. Yeah, oh, next one, all right, well, I'll look forward to it. Okay, we have a motion and a second on the table to close the hearing and take it under advisement. Jen, we can put in the conditions that you would need to see the dewatering plan
Oh, yeah,
before we begin.
so they're running into water over there.
Are there any other questions on the board? Are there any questions from the audience? Okay, motion and a second on the table to close the hearing and take it under advisement. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Unanimous, so moved. Have a good weekend, Kim.
And one other thing,
Go Bruins.
Yeah.
Yep, amen.
Any
See,
score
we
yet?
always get out of here with one hearing.
Any score? Is there a score?
Puck dropped 5 seconds ago. According to my iPhone, that Courtney's monitoring.
Nothing further.
All right,
No.
thanks.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good luck.
It's a beautiful spot, you'll love it. Okay, continued request for hearings under notice of intent. James Lucio. Mike, could you tell everyone to move out of earshot, please?
He's
Lot-
ushering him down the hallway.
532 Acapesket Road is continued until June 26th. Estate of Angeline Caruso, care of Eugene Caruso, executor, 191 Edgewater Drive West, East Falmouth, for permission to construct a new 3-bedroom, single-family house with an attached deck, AC units to install a Title V sewage disposal system, driveway utilities, native mitigation plantings, and the associated clearing, excavating, grading, and landscaping. Request for a variance under FWR 10.13 from the performance standards set out in FWR 10.185A1A, buffer zone to the salt marsh, and FWR 10.185A3E, buffer zone to a coastal bank. Jen?
Yes, Madam Chairman, I will save any of my comments until after the applicant's presentation.
Brian, it's been so long since we've seen you.
Madam Chair, for the record, my name is Brian Wall, I'm attorney with Falmouth, and I represent the applicant, Eugene Caruso, who is the executor of the estate of his mother, Angeline Caruso. And with me tonight is Mike Verselli from Falmouth Engineering and Teresa Sprague from Reflex Design. I'm going to give a very brief introduction. The estate is the owner of the property, 191 Edgewater Drive West in Falmouth. It's an 11,000 square foot property that fronts on Edgewater Drive and on the rear front. All of the lots in the surrounding area have been developed. This is one of the last, if not the last, undeveloped lot in the area. The Carusos are proposing to build a very modest 3-bedroom house with a deck, a driveway, septic system, and some associated landscaping. Mr. Rizzelli will give an overview of the project, and discuss compliance with performance standards to the extent that the project does. Teresa will discuss the planting plan, and then I will address the variance at the end of the presentation. Before I turn it over to Mr. Roselli, I want to note, and I want to make sure that there's no confusion with our plans. We were scheduled for a hearing about 3 weeks ago, and what happened was when we were waiting for our turn on the agenda, there was an abutter, Mr. Andrews, who was here, and he had some pictures of the site that predated the bylaw, that go back to the 60s, that shows some clearing. And our plans did in fact incorporate the clearing, but we incorrectly made the assumption that the clearing had been done after the adoption of the bylaw without permits. And our original set of plans characterized the planting that we proposed in those areas as restoration planting, and we were not claiming credit for the mitigation planting. But when we came to the new information and realized that the lot had been actually lawfully cleared prior to the adoption of the bylaw, we asked for a continuance, and we have modified our plans. They're essentially the same plans, except now the areas that were cleared were claiming credit for mitigation planting. And I just wanted to put that out there, because if you look at the plans, there might be some confusion. Having said that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Roselli to give an overview of the project.
Madam Chairman, members of the commission, my name is Michael Borselli from Falmouth Engineering, and I represent the applicant. I have a butters notifications, and I also have copies for the record of those photos that Mr. Andrews emailed to us that show these areas of clearing. These are taken from this property. One of these properties that a family member owns, and they were taken of the waterfront, and you can see in the background lot 191, house number 191, lot 12. These aren't dated, but I think you'd probably agree based on the vintage dress and vintage boat and things like that, that it probably predates 75, but since it's not dated, they're not dated. We also submitted to you, and it's in your file, 1975 aerial that is consistent with those photos. It shows barren, areas barren and void of vegetation, which is why we made the changes in the nomenclature on the plan. So the applicant's family owns the property at 191 Edgewater Drive West, and it's shown on this overall town GIS map. And I put this up here for reference to show you Eel Pond, the upper reaches of Eel Pond, and the surrounding neighborhood, including across the pond, Antler Shore, and then some of the intersecting streets on Seacoast Shores that you're familiar with. I also put it up here to try to demonstrate that 191 is really the last undeveloped lot. There's one up here. But the balance of the properties have been developed over the years in this neighborhood. So the plans we have are rendered on this drawing. And I'll start with the wetland resources. Starting at the far west side of the property, we have Eel Pond, which is the upper reaches of the coastal embayment, and it's land under the ocean. And then directly adjacent to that is the typical green salt marsh. And the landform rises up at sufficient slope that it meets the definitions of coastal bank. And the coastal bank is also delineated on this plan. And it's shown basically coincident with the flood zone, because that's how you delineate the bank by the DEP policy. The dark green area is an area that's vegetated today. The lighter green area over here is an area that has been in our opinion, it was cleared prior to 1975 because it shows in that area photo. Adjacent to the property is the family of Mr. Andrews, who was the man who provided the photos and some a little anecdotal history. And then there's another developed property next door. We're proposing a house, single-family dwelling, 3 bedrooms. It has dimensions that measure 26 by 44 as the overall footprint. And it has a small deck measuring 12 by 12 on one side. When we were in the development stages of this plan and before we submitted the application, we actually met with Jen. Brian, Teresa, and I met with Jen to talk about this project, and we had actually had a different plan at the time. We had a much larger deck proposed, and I think we had a little bit less proposed mitigation planting areas. So we listened to Jen and we made some changes to the plan, the largest of which was we dramatically reduced the size of the deck from one that we were hoping we could put across the entire front face of the house. We reduced it down to a 12 by 12 on this side. The dimensions of this house was specifically chosen because they seemed to be a size that you were comfortable with on a previous application under a variance application on Squidnocket, number 78 Squidnocket. And after several iterations on that project, we came to a consensus and an agreement was reached where that was a reasonable dimensioned house on this very similar sized lot. In fact, this lot, the variances that we're requesting are much less intrusive than the ones on that application. So we thought it was a fitting size house for this application. Associated with the house is a driveway shown in gray, and these blue components are the proposed septic system. The septic system is between the house and the road, and it is placed in a position that gets it as far as physically possible from the wetland resources. In fact, we previously went to the Board of Health and applied for and obtained the necessary variances to allow it to be placed basically right up against the street. In fact, the Board of Health was reluctant to grant a couple of the variances we had from the septic system to the house foundation, and they suggested that we alter the foundation so that there's actually a section of the house that is power supported on the front, and you can see a dashed line. By power supporting that part and having an open crawl space under that with no cellar and that one section across the front, it enabled us to eliminate a couple of variances we needed from the Board of Health. And when we made that change, they granted the variance, and that was submitted as part of our application to you. The septic system is in a place where it meets all of your requirements for setbacks with the exception of the setback to the top of the coastal bank. It is actually set back approximately 140 feet from the edge of the salt marsh, and your minimum setback for the leaching system is 100 feet, so it's in excess of the setback to the environmentally sensitive wetland resource by 40 feet. We have shown the top of the coastal bank and the septic system at its closest point on this corner is set back 50 feet from the top of the coastal bank, and that setback increases as the coastal bank gets further and further from the septic system. But there's no place on the lot where we can site it such that it meets the 100-foot setback. The area where the house is proposed is wooded. All of the trees that are on the lot have been delineated and surveyed and with the sizes. And we've shown on the plan as well the ones that have to be removed. There's no way to avoid the removal of these trees because the lot's entirely wooded. And there's no place on the lot where we could site the house in a place where there would be no need to remove trees. That being said, we've, on Teresa's plans, there's mitigation for the trees that she can go into with you on how we're proposing to mitigate for the trees. We've also developed a mitigation plan that goes through the calculations for the amount of impervious surfaces on the project, and they're shown on my plan, calculated in the summary of impervious surfaces notes, and on the blue flex plan, we show the detail of the areas of mitigation and the types of plant species proposed that are, they're shown generally on this plan, but more specifically on Teresa's plan. Within the narrative for the notice of intent, we touch on issues related to the septic system, issues and concerns that you may have about the septic system. And we go through an analysis about what the regulations say and how we've done our best to meet the performance standards or demonstrated that the presumptions have been overcome. Section 6.0 of the narrative with the heading septic system issues and concerns outlines those details. I don't know if it's appropriate to read it or if it makes more sense for you folks to read and digest that, but I'll just read a couple of sections that I think are important.
What sections are you reading, Mike? Sorry.
I'm on page 88 of the narrative.
Thank you.
In the analysis of the potential impacts to the wetland resources, we've assumed that the groundwater flow is in a westerly direction towards the wetland resource areas. The closest sensitive receptor resource area is the salt marsh, which is more than 140 feet from the edge of the proposed leaching system. Since the setback from the salt marsh is in excess of 100 feet, we have assumed that groundwater does flow towards the salt marsh. The septic system meets the performance standard for that setback. For this reason, a formal hydrologic study to determine groundwater flow was not performed because we made the assumption that it would flow in a westerly direction. Any other direction would be away from any wetland resources. Since the leaching facility exceeds the applicable setback for salt marsh, it's our opinion will have no adverse effect on the resource values of water pollution control, shellfish, or fisheries. Similarly, it is our opinion that the proposed system will have no impact on public or private water supplies. The entire area is served by town water. There are no known private wells or water supplies in close proximity to the proposed system. There are no public water supplies in close proximity. And then I touch on coastal bank issue. Coastal banks are significant to wildlife habitat and storm damage prevention and flood control. The proposed septic system is less than 100 feet from the top of the coastal bank, but it will have no impact on these interests. As stated previously, the lot is located in a densely developed neighborhood surrounded by residential homes. There is no significant wildlife habitat in this area. If the impacts to wildlife habitat from the installation of the system have been overcome. With regard to storm damage prevention and flood control, the septic system is constructed as far as possible from the top of the coastal bank at its closest point bank will continue to provide storm damage and flood control, therefore this presumption of significance has been overcome. The typical other things we're proposing are a limit of work, as you would expect, and the house is proposed to be served by dry wells, contain roof runoff. We've done our best to concentrate the development in an area on the lot that is far away from the wetland resources as possible. However, there's just no way that we can meet all of the standards. And this is a lot that was created at a time in the 1940s, actually, well before any of the current regulations were contemplated. I think this project qualifies for the variances we requested, and I'm here to answer any questions. And I'll turn it over to Teresa.
Good evening, Teresa.
Good evening, everybody. Teresa Sprague with Lex Design. I'm going to start with the existing conditions on the property and then work through the mitigation plan. This property is really interesting and comprises a really beautiful native plant community, so I'd like to point that out right away and then discuss it a little further. As Mike pointed out, the currently undeveloped property is located within the densely developed area on the shores of Bear Pond. Oak and pitch pine are the dominant canopy species, with some eastern red cedar and black cherry located in the southwestern portion of the lot near the edge of the salt marsh. The understory ground cover layer in the eastern portion of the property comprises black huckleberry, checkerberry, and ferns, with greenbrier and some native grasses, including pen sedge and Deschampsia flexuosa to spread throughout. The canopy throughout this portion of the property is high and dense and allows little light to reach the ground cover layer. Species diversity increases towards the western portion of the property near the salt marsh. The trees in this portion of the property include oak and cherry, with some eastern red cedar and pitch pine saplings noted. I think the interesting thing is the oak and cherry trees have been pruned and are topped here consistently over time. And I have some photographs that I actually took last fall that I'd like to pass out, if that's okay.
Okay, and then I have to go into the record.
Yes, absolutely. Vegetation. Those data were showing vegetation that show the condition of the trees in the southwestern portion of the property. So through this topping and pruning, they've created more shrub-like specimens of trees, and these lower trees have actually allowed more light in, significantly more light to reach the understory layer, and therefore a more robust and diverse shrub layer thrives. Species noted here in this area include bayberry, mannyberry, Irish blueberry, serviceberry, Virginia rose, swamp rose, calmia, black huckleberry, switchback, gooseberry, and sedge, and Lowish blueberry. So it's a really healthy native plant community flower. This entire open portion of the property. The salt marsh and high marsh species on the edge of the Bear Pond transitioning into the buffer zone includes Spartina altiniflora, Peytons, Fructescens, Bacchus, Hollandifolia, and a large area. However, the large area along the southern property of the boundary has been maintained by lawn, as lawn by the abutter directly to the south since at least the early 60s. And that's this area here. You can see this area shown directly by the salt marsh area. A portion of the driveway for the neighboring property is located on a clear portion of this property closest to Edgewater Drive. Some dumping, mostly vegetation debris, was noted on site, and I'm going to point this out because I was actually at the lot this morning, and I visited this lot several times through last fall, over the winter, and then again as recently as this morning. And all of this vegetation debris that's been dumped is brand new. It wasn't existing on the site when I was there all throughout last fall and winter. So I think what's happening is that other vegetation debris has also been piled up along these areas here. And So my concern with that, and I know that, we discussed this with Jen, and at the time, it didn't seem to be a big deal, but through the storms that we had throughout the winter, and branches down, and people clearing their lots of vegetation debris, as we see happen on a lot of these undeveloped lots, this sort of becomes the neighborhood dumping ground for grass clippings and vegetation debris. And the concern with this is that all of this debris is dumped on top of a really healthy black huckleberry, checkerberry plant community. So what happens is, right now, this lot is surprisingly void of invasive species. There's, on the southern property boundary, there's a little bit of bittersweet moving in, but generally this lot is clear of invasive species, which you often don't see on an undeveloped lot like this. But as more vegetation debris gets dumped, areas get disturbed, those areas start to fill in, and invasive species tend to fill in the niche. I apologize, but all of a sudden it's freezing. Can you sure it was just...
I've been freezing since we walked into this room.
Now I'm like shivering, so I forgot to wear my winter clothes. So overall, the goals of the plan, of this land management plan that I'm presenting tonight, are to protect the stability, function, and wildlife habitat value of the saltmarsh coastal bank and buffer zone. We'll accomplish this through planting of native woody vegetation, enhancement of existing vegetation on site, protecting and improving the ecological integrity and wildlife habitat value of the salt marsh coastal bank by limiting human disturbance, foot traffic, mowing within the existing lawn portions of the bank and buffer zone directly adjacent to the salt marsh. Dense vertical layers of vegetation, including native trees, shrubs, and ground cover species, will be established in the area. The proposed project will not destroy any portion of the salt marsh coastal bank, will not have any adverse effect on salt marsh productivity or bank stability. No coastal engineering structures or footpaths through the buffer zone or bank to the salt marsh are proposed. A previously degraded portion of the salt marsh will be restored and protected by the proposed buffer zone enhancement. In addition, the proper management of the existing bank and buffer zone vegetation, including stopping the previously unpermitted clearing of trees and dumping of vegetation debris, these mitigation measures will better protect the salt marsh and coastal bank resource area than if the project is done. So in light of these goals, the proposed project and mitigation measures will have no adverse impact on the resource areas or buffer zone, and will actually enhance and protect the interests of the State Wetlands Protection Act and wetlands regulations. Specifically, the project will result in the following environmental benefits. We'll be restoring and enhancing degraded areas of the salt marsh, approximately 300 square feet. Where the salt marsh area is abutting the cleared area that's been mown regularly, and previously boats were stored by the neighbor on this portion of the property down here. These areas of the salt marsh have been locked on the shrubwood and graded. So we'll have an opportunity to restore that and protect it by planting that buffer area adjacent to the salt marsh. Preserve the salt marsh by limiting human disturbance, which was occurring in that area. Current lawns will be planted with native woody vegetation, limiting human access to the salt marsh, preventing foot traffic and lawn damage. We'll be protecting existing native ground cover vegetation located in the building envelope by carefully removing that vegetation and storing the protected areas off-site or replanting immediately inside the mitigation planting areas. We'll manage previously pruned vegetation within the buffer zone using best management practices. Previously pruned oak trees will be managed with a mix of corrective pruning and coppice regeneration methods to ensure the long-term health and proper regrowth of the trees. Protection of the salt marsh from stormwater runoff, installation of dry wells and rain barrels, and planting appropriate native vegetation in all disturbed areas within the limit of work and throughout the existing lawn areas. A couple of things that Mike pointed out: tree removal and replanting. On page 6 of the land management plan, I've included a table of what's going to be removed from the area. In total, 21 trees, totaling 196 caliber inches, are proposed to be removed from within the building envelope, and they're shown within Excel. Some of those trees are severely damaged. As a matter of fact, there's one that really needs to be removed immediately. It's a pitch pine. It's entirely split, leaning towards the neighbor's house, and he has some fears that it will cause some damage. The tree replanting that we're showing on this plan illustrates a number of locations of trees to be replanted. All trees shown with the E, you see right here, are existing, and all will be protected throughout the construction process. Trees will be planted at 1 inch and then 3.5 to 4 inch tall per side and approximately 10 foot on center spacing. Tree species will include a mix of white oak, scrub oak, pitch pine, serviceberry, and eastern red cedar. We're proposing to replant 27 trees, totaling approximately 78 caliber inches. Within the previously cleared area along the southern and southwestern property boundary, and then along the northeastern property boundary. Previously pruned trees in the western portion of the property should be assessed by a certified arborist for proper management using best arborist practices. Trees throughout the area, as I just said, have been pruned continuously, it appears, for a number of years. Many of the trees have developed actually into healthy fruit-bearing shrub form, high wildlife habitat value, both for food and cover. Another benefit of the trees being managed this way is that there's a rich, diverse, and dense native understory, as you can see from those photos I've passed around, is developed. Unlike the high, densely canopied, very shady area to the east where we're proposing to put the building, this area is actually incredibly densely planted with really beautiful native plant species. I was just up there today and the calmia is blooming. It's really just phenomenal. Each of the trees should be assessed by an arborist in the property and to either maintain their current shrubbier form, which is appropriate, as many of these are Orchis cifolia, or to be encouraged through proper pruning to grow back into canopy-sized trees. The importance of maintaining the healthy existing root systems and thriving native plant community in this portion of the buffer zone should be a main consideration for the development of any tree management plan in this area. Any management that takes place in this portion of the buffer zone should minimize or eliminate any disturbance of existing native vegetation, roots, and soils. And, preserving this area is hugely important on this piece of property, particularly because nothing like this exists in the entire neighborhood. Another opportunity that we have here is to harvest some of the existing native shrubs in the building envelope before we start construction. Black huckleberry, checkerberry comprise the bulk of the ground cover layer throughout this area. Before tree removal and construction begins, we propose to carefully remove this vegetation by hand or using low ground pressure equipment and immediately replant that vegetation within the proposed mitigation planting areas. And here. Any that will not be planted there and that are proposed for replanting within the limit of work, we would hold off-site and then transplant that when construction is completed. The benefits of harvesting this native vegetation before site planning begins and replanting back is, number one, the ability to use native plant material that is often difficult to find commercially in revegetation and mitigation projects. The existing native plant materials adapted to the challenges of the project areas wind, salt, or site index that grow more vigorously, have lower mortality rates. Local ecotypes are preserved, preserves genetic diversity, and protects local gene pools and genetic variation within the ecotype in terms of form, size, growth rate, etc. So I think this is a fantastic opportunity we have here to, with proper site engineering and going through this project from start to finish, to really come in and save a significant amount of that black huckleberry and checkerberry ground cover layer. Salt marsh enhancement with the newly planted buffer vegetation and the previously cleared area of the southern property boundary. We have an opportunity to restore approximately 300 square foot area with a mix of forbs and grasses, 2-inch plugs planted 8 to 10 inches on center spacing, including Spartina patens, Testiculus spicata, blackgrass, salt marsh bulrush, high tide bush, and groundsel bush. And that would be planted within this area here. And what we're seeing in this area.
Teresa, does that area have indicators of hydric soils?
I am seeing, it looks like we've got a rack line here. I'm not seeing an indication of hydric soils up in here. I'm seeing this being more of a high marsh species area. However, I'm seeing, this is the regular black line. We're showing on the plan mean high water. Oh, I'm sorry, I thought that was on this plan, it might be on Mike's plan.
Okay.
So we've got that edge there. So in addition to the 27 trees within the mitigation area, we're in around the building envelope, we're proposing 200 plus shrubs, 350 grasses and forbs. In the salt marsh area, we're looking at 255 plugs and 8 additional shrubs in that area. Again, the one last note, obviously temporary irrigation, we're proposing to get plants established. Once plants are established, temporary irrigation would be removed. Lawn areas, which would be directly around the house and over the septic area on the road, would be low water fescue mixes managed organically according to Falmouth friendly law standards. So I'm happy to answer any questions about that.
Thank you.
Brian?
Thank you, Betsy. The application includes a request for variance, and so my presentation will address that part of it. The commission is well familiar, I'm sure, with section 10.13 of your regulations, which allows an applicant who has a hardship to seek a variance provided 5 criteria are met. In brief, they are the following: that it does not meet one or more performance standards, that mitigation measures are proposed by the applicant that will allow the project to be conditioned so as to contribute to the protection of the resource areas, that the project does not create a nuisance, that the hardship was not the result of any actions of the applicant, and finally, that the resource areas are better protected if the project is allowed, or the project is, provides an overriding public benefit. And we would respectfully submit in my presentation to demonstrate that the project meets all of these standards. The first component is relatively simple. This project does not meet 2 of the buffer zone regulations. Specifically, the project is in the no disturbance area to the salt marsh and to the non-eroding coastal bank, and the provisions are cited in my request for variance. Specifically, they are 10.18.5A1A and 10.18.5A3E. The second component is that the mitigating measures and conditions will contribute to the protection of the resource areas. Obviously, we're proposing the standard types of things like stake, straw bales, and siltation fencing, and all of the things that were touched upon by Teresa, which I'm not going to repeat, but I'll highlight. Specifically, we're limiting the lawn area to 1,800 square feet, and it's proposed to be Falmouth friendly. Dry wells are being proposed to collect all the roof runoff. The mitigation plantings that were discussed in detail by Teresa, which include the following: all of the cleared areas that I mentioned at the beginning of our proposal, which were done lawfully before the adoption of the bylaw. The trees in the buffer zone that have been cut and cleaned, that will stop. The land management plan proposes mitigation plantings in all of these disturbed areas and corrected pruning. And we would submit that this results in enhancement of the existing and degraded vegetated buffer and an improved overall buffer. The salt marsh component of our mitigation, again, is gone over in detail by Teresa. We're proposing to restore approximately 120 square feet of the degraded marsh. Marsh is considered to be a high interest resource, and we would submit that the restoration will increase the salt marsh on the site and will enhance the ecological integrity and function of the salt marsh that exists. The mitigation plantings are specifically proposed in cleared areas on the coastal bank and adjacent to the coastal bank, which will enhance the integrity of the coastal bank. The dumping that Teresa talked about will cease. You heard her address how the lot, being the only one left in the area, is the dumping ground by the neighbors. By building the house and by taking control of the lot, this practice will stop. We would submit to you that this project as proposed does not present any significant or cumulative adverse impacts, and that the mitigation that we are proposing will allow the project to be conditioned so as to satisfy the requirements of the variance. The third component is also relatively straightforward and easy one. The project cannot create a nuisance. A nuisance is a legal term that means that something that you do on your property adversely affects someone else's property. The classic example under wetlands would be that if you fill on your property and it results in flooding to your neighbor, obviously that's an adverse effect. This project will not cause any adverse effects to your bylaw or to any of the neighboring properties, and therefore there is no nuisance. The fourth component of your bylaw requires that the applicant have a hardship. Hardship is defined in your definitions section, and I'm summarizing it. It says that when the literal application of the wetlands bylaw to a particular piece of property, evaluated in its totality, causes an unduly oppressive result or would cause the applicant substantial economic loss. And the simple way to summarize my argument is that this lot has a hardship and this applicant has a hardship because of the application of your bylaw and regulations. And why its hardship is the following. This particular lot was created in 1947, and I've attached a copy of the subdivision plan to my request. Obviously, that date long predated the wetlands bylaw. It is one of several hundred lots in the subdivision. The applicant's parents purchased the lot in 1966, so that was 47 years ago. Again, a decade or two before the wetlands bylaw was adopted in this town. Mr. Caruso's parents owned the property until they passed away. It's currently in the estate, and Mr. Caruso, the applicant, and his brother are the heirs and will inherit this property. For the 45-plus years that the family has owned the property, they have had a reasonable expectation of building a house on the property. It is a buildable lot under zoning. It's been assessed by the town as a buildable lot. Currently, in 2013, the assessment is $407,100, and the applicant is paying an annual tax of $3,273 plus a $98 Community Preservation Act charge. During all these years, the taxes have been paid, and the applicant has had the expectation of building a modest property home. The hardship in this case is due singularly to the adoption of the wetlands regulations. But for the two regulations that I cited at the beginning of my presentation, a house would otherwise be able to be built. It is because of the dimensions of the lot, the topography, specifically the coastal bank and the salt marsh, that caused the lot to be unbuildable in the absence of a variance. With the variance, it will be buildable. I've cited some case law in my presentation, and interestingly tonight, the primary case I cite is Pauling versus Bruins. I didn't know that would be important tonight, but the case stands for the proposition, and it very clearly says in 1984, the appeals court said that a lot that is unbuildable without a variance and has no other reasonable use but that of a residential home has a hardship. And that's right on point with tonight. Our presentation is that without a variance, the lot is essentially unbuildable, which obviously causes the applicant a substantial economic loss. We would respectfully submit that that's a classic case for a variance, and that the applicant in this case has a hardship. The final component of your bylaw and your regulation says that a variance can be issued if the resource areas will be better protected if the project is allowed than if denied, or alternatively, the project has an overriding public benefit. And we submit that we meet both prongs of that disjunctive test. First of all, we would submit that the project does not have any adverse impact on the functions of the coastal bank, wildlife habitat, or on the salt marsh. Bearing that in mind, we proposed the land management plan that Teresa discussed, which enhances the resource areas on the property, enhances the salt marsh and the vegetated buffer, enhances the stability of the coastal bank, the ability to provide wildlife habitat, and by stopping the dumping and the illegal cleaning. In addition, as far as public benefit is concerned, the degraded salt marsh is being improved, which under, again, I mentioned earlier, your regulations hold salt marsh in high regard as far as its ability to filter pollutants and promote shellfish beds. And finally, there's some tax consequences that are in the alternative. If the variance is allowed, there will be a public benefit because the construction of the house will increase the assessment and thereby increase the taxes coming into the town. And the corollary is also true, that if the variance is denied and the lot is rendered unbuildable, the amount of taxes that will be able to be collected will go down. And for those reasons, we think that we need both prongs. The last part of my presentation, I want to compare the similarities of this particular project and the arguments that I just asserted with the Spolaris case that was decided relatively recently by the commission and by the court. And in that particular instance, the Spolarises had made the same three arguments that I just made, specifically that the assessed value of the property would fall if the variance were not granted, that the assessment would increase if the house were to be constructed, and that that lot also was one of the last, if not the last, in the neighborhood, and was being dumped upon, and if the construction were allowed, the dumping would stop. And when those arguments were initially presented to the commission rejected them and said that they were not persuaded and that that did not meet the requirements of the variance criteria in the regulations. But when that was appealed to the Superior Court, and again I cite the case and I gave a copy of the opinion, Judge Muse specifically ruled that each one of those arguments was a valid argument. And so my submission to you is I'm not attempting to argue that because Spolaris got a variance, you must give it to Caruso. But what I am suggesting strongly is that if you look carefully, the arguments that were asserted in the Spolaris case that were affirmed by the court are the very same ones that we're making here. And I would ask that the commission look carefully at that and be persuaded and follow the rules of the Superior Court. I have any, that's my presentation. If there are any questions, I'm available to answer.
I'm going to begin with you, Jen.
Okay, question, Mike, who did your wetland line? Why I'm asking is because you have the salt marsh, probably delineated at the spring high tide line. Landward of that, you probably have a bordering vegetated wetland associated that where Teresa wants to do a restoration, so that's gonna need to be shown on the plan or investigated a little bit more. Okay?
What my office did, we did not believe there was a BBW, but we can work with.
Yeah, well, that's just a statement, okay? I have a question now. In your summary of impervious surfaces, can you tell me what the total disturbance, including the clearing is in Zone A?
I actually put a note in the middle of the plan.
Okay, so it is that.
Yes.
Okay.
It's total disturbance, which is not just a part of the deed.
Okay.
It's the overall.
Because they don't, why I'm saying this is, I know I met with you prior to this application, and I think throughout that discussion, as much as you may not have wanted to hear it, I kept reiterating that the project that you originally proposed and this one does not meet our regulations. It doesn't meet the setback to salt marsh. It doesn't meet the setback to the top of the coastal bank. It does not meet the mitigation replanting requirements if it were to meet those. And it also, a number of square feet or quite a few square feet of your mitigation along the edges of the houses do fall within that 10 feet of the house. So that also is a performance standard that this project does not meet, as well as not meeting the setback for the septic system. I understand, I heard your argument about the septic system, Mike, but you know, these ponds are highly, highly impaired. So the board could request a nitrogen loading thing. I didn't see that. Did you provide that, Mike?
I did not do
Okay.
a nitrogen loading study.
Okay. I mean, you have a tight lot, you have a tight site. You all knew when you walked in here, you know, what you were up against. So there are at least five performance standards that I, off the top, see that you don't meet on this project. You answered the question about the board is gonna have to decide whether or not they feel that this law constitutes a hardship. Staff's not quite convinced of that. And whether or not you feel that the criteria in your variance have been met. You all know the variance criteria. You can make a determination of whether or not you feel putting a structure and a septic system is better protecting the resource area than what currently exists today. The only other thing I have to add is that although Attorney Wall cited a case that you approved, you will remember, most of you, that you did make a statement in the courts that the commission erred in judgment, made an error when it found that the Spolaris satisfied the requirements of the 6 variances of the regulation. Your counsel came in, discussed, and that was put into the court's records regarding that. So you did and accepted that the board made an error when you granted those 6 variances. And as always, when that case comes up, this is going, I think there's already a copy, and it's the pleadings for Spolaris, so we can put that in. It's already in there, I believe. You know, it's a small site, it's a difficult site. Unfortunately, the proposal does not meet a number of your regulations.
Courtney?
My question is, could you, Mr. Wall, could you provide the commission with a copy of the case decision that you
He did,
cited
Courtney.
in here?
He did.
I didn't see it.
No, I didn't.
Oh, I thought you did, Brian. I thought you
No,
said
he
exhibit.
cited the Spolaris one.
Yeah, I
I'm talking
provided
about the
the
other one that you mentioned earlier.
Oh, the Bruins one.
Yes.
Okay.
I'd be happy to.
Thank you. No other questions.
Mario?
I'm not in the usual customary of granting variances. I think it should only be in rare and unusual circumstances, and that's what the regs say, rare and unusual circumstances. On the other hand, I think Mr. Wall, his arguments were pretty cogent, and he did go point by point. And it may very well be that the hardship threshold has been met. I was very impressed with Blue Flax's land management plan. It went into great detail, it was very comprehensive. It was a good diversity of native plantings, no monocultures here. It was a very nice plan, and I even like the fact that the ground cover, which is going to be within the footprint, they're saving that. Now, you know, I've been in this business a long time. I haven't seen that kind of sensitivity. Usually, they just blow in with the bulldozers, and whatever's, you know, growing in the footprint is gone. But they're going to great pains to save native ground cover. I don't know, I think it's a very nice planting plan.
Any questions?
That's it.
I did not see a drywall detail on the plan. And then I also had a question about, there was a mention of a rain barrel. Is that gonna be something that's,
I'll get you the drywall detail,
thank you,
and Teresa mentioned the rain barrel, so I'll let her speak to that.
thank you.
I did mention the rain barrels because I think that they're a fantastic opportunity to provide some temporary irrigation, some of the temporary irrigation that's going to be required, as well as just for watering plants on decks. I'm a huge advocate for rain barrels, so I'm strongly advocating for rain barrels to be used on the site with dry wells for overflow. I know right now my rain barrels are they're overflowing, but like every place else, my backyard is completely flooded. But I'm a huge advocate for rain barrels, and I think there's a great opportunity to use them here on site.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
No, not this time.
Mike?
The question of serving the public good here, the argument is on taxes, as I take it.
That was one of the, yes.
And the others are?
The salt marsh, or the overriding public benefit.
I buy that, I like that. And the issue, I guess the issue on taxes that bothers me is if you, for every child we put into the school system, the taxes on property doesn't cost that for the number of years the student is there. So I'm questioning your math on that.
Well, I didn't get into that exact math. I think the issue is we have to show that there's an overriding public benefit. And the argument is that if a house is constructed, the assessment goes up and the tax forever more will be more than the lot vacant. There is another argument that I didn't mention.
I'd like to hear it.
Yeah, it's in my papers. But also what the Superior Court said was that, and these are kind of like fighting words, that's why I didn't mention them, but I put them in my papers. But if the lot is rendered unbuildable by regulation, case law says that it can become what's called a regulatory taking, and that the property owner would therefore be eligible to bring a case against the town and recover the fair market value. And in the Spolaris case, what the court did, and I quoted it in my request, the judge looked at it and said that the tax argument has a separate component about the taking. And it said, and I quote, "It is also a good public good to maintain a balance between the enforcement of laws and the taking of private property so that one does not become de facto the other." And so I think what the court was trying to say there is that the variance procedure itself provides a public good by allowing a property owner to avoid harsh, oppressive, and unjust result to build a house. And the corollary of that is if the town strictly enforces those bylaws and takes the property, they have to pay from the public coffers. And therefore avoiding a taking is a public good.
That's it for me.
I have enough information, thank you.
I have some questions. I'll start with you, Mike. What's the coverage of impervious surface in the A zone?
Is it 1072, Mike?
1,072.
And how much mitigation planting?
The overall mitigation planting is 2,460 square feet.
So not 3 to 1.
Correct.
So that's another regulation.
Yeah, I
that you said.
mentioned that,
All
Madam
right.
Chairman. And also because because it's such a small site, a lot of the mitigation are within 10 feet of the structure, and you don't consider that mitigation.
Okay, I'm also going to put into the record the Mass DEP report for this water body. This is an impaired water body. And to say that you're going to add another house, add another septic system, and you're not going to be adding stress to that water body, but you're improving the system, is an argument that I find hard to agree. I thought Teresa did a great job for her part of the project. Having said that, I estimated that there's about 5,000 square feet of vegetation that's going to be impacted by building, and it's vegetation that would serve much better for wildlife habitat in that area if left as it was. So one of my questions is, and any one of you could answer this, couldn't all those areas be restored without building this house? All the areas that are cleared? I'm not saying you might choose to do that. My question is, yes or no?
Do you mean, could they be restored without building a house?
Correct.
Well, I mean, obviously, it's almost a rhetorical question. I think the answer is yes, but would that cause a substantial economic loss to the applicant? Equally, yes.
I'm just asking, if someone owned this lot and they chose to come in and to fill in those areas to apply to this board, because they're all in the A zone, isn't that a possibility?
Yes.
All right. The argument about taxes in addition to schools, there's additional taxes of government to support police, fire, et cetera. And we've had that argument before, but this is a town that values its open space and actually grants conservation restrictions on areas, not taking them completely, but partially out of tax rolls to maintain open space. So that's, the tax argument might be appropriate in some areas, but it's not that appropriate here. Also, in terms of rare and unusual circumstances, any lot that doesn't meet performance standards, and there are others in town, there are a number of lots that once regulations were put into existence, didn't meet performance standards, and it's whoever owns those lots chooses to keep paying the taxes year after year. The other choice is, and I've known several people who have owned waterfront lots who have gone in and taken them off or had them claimed as unbuildable lots. So that's a choice, that's the choice made by the person who owns this lot. I don't see where this meets a rare and unusual circumstance.
May I respond to that?
Mm-hmm.
It's actually not one of your criteria. I think if you look at your bylaw and regulations very carefully, the criteria are the ones that I cited. There's a footnote that says that variances are intended to be granted only in rare and unusual circumstances, but it's not part of the criteria. And even if it were, I would submit that we made that case, because I think this is a rare and unusual case when a piece of property has been in one family for 45 plus years, and all of the lots in the area have been developed, and this is the last one. By definition, that's a rare case.
But that was a choice made by your
No,
applicant.
it wasn't a choice. It was a choice made by the applicant in 1966 when they bought the property, but they held on to it and the regulations changed over time. And that's what the variance procedure is all about, and I think we might disagree philosophically about what it is. But the variance procedure essentially recognizes that as we become a more sophisticated and knowledgeable society, we pass more and more protective rules and regulations, but those then have an impact on the ability of a property owner to do something. And if you want to add on a kitchen or a deck and you already get an existing house and you can't do that, I can't make a case for a hardship because that's not a substantial economic loss. But when an applicant comes before the board and has a vacant buildable lot under zoning, and the only reason they can't build is because the regulations have increased, the variance procedure provides a balancing act. And basically it says, if you look at the criteria, if you can demonstrate that the resource areas will be adequately protected, and you can demonstrate that there's going to be an economic loss, the board has the authority to give the permit. And we think we've made the case in this instance.
I would argue you're only having an economic loss if you continue to pay the taxes on a lot that is not buildable under the Wetlands Protection Act and the Falmouth Wetlands Bylaw,
Well, I think
which
under
is
that-
what we are judging this project. If you choose to take it to court, and if you choose to ask for a regulatory, to argue that it's a regulatory taking, you have that right, your applicants, your clients have that right. But our judgment, this board, is whether this meets the Wetlands Protection Act.
Well, not when there's a variance request. I think you have to apply the criteria. In fact, I think if you...
But one of the criteria is that this is going to better protect the resource.
Right.
And I don't agree with your
And that's
argument.
something the board
Well, again,
can
as long as
discuss.
we're talking about the same criteria. But as the last argument, if I understand the logic of it, is if a property owner who owns an asset continues to pay taxes year after year, then that's kind of their bad decision or their tough luck, that they could stop paying the taxes at any time and avoid the hardship. Do I understand that correctly? If I don't, tell me. The way I think
If somebody has a piece of property and it no longer is buildable because of wetlands protection regulations, they can go into the assessor's office and have it deemed a non-buildable lot.
And then, with with all due respect, I think what you're reading out of that argument is the loss of the asset. This asset is assessed at $400,000. So if the applicant goes in and says to the assessor, my lot's no longer buildable, the value that existed before the regulation came into place, that was taken away by that regulation.
It wasn't a $400,000 lot in 1960.
The regulations that we have a problem with, though, came into effect in 2008. And so I could get the board the valuation, but I would submit it was close to where we're arguing, not 1966. The lot was buildable for quite a long time. It's the mitigation and the no disturb buffer zones that came into effect in 2008 that caused the problem. Let's assume.
Well, I doubt that this would have met
No,
the
I don't think
regulations
it,
prior to that.
it didn't meet the 98 ones either, Brian. 'Cause the 98 one said 75 to 100 feet. The board had the discretion at that time to require a 100-foot buffer to a salt marsh, just putting that out there.
I'm not arguing that
Yeah.
point. My major point is being lost. The issue is the asset has value, and it maintained that value until the regulations change. And if the lot is rendered unbuildable by that change, then that's when the loss of value.
Well, my
occurs.
main point is, you have to convince me that these resources are gonna be better off with this building than without. And,
Well, I think we tried to make that case. I'm not gonna
right,
restate.
right, I know you did, I know what your arguments are. I'm just saying, I don't buy that.
Well, and just,
Okay.
again, they've been made, I would respectfully submit that, particularly with the evidence that we showed that this lot had substantial clearing prior to the enactment of the bylaw, that is being restored and mitigated, I think needs to be.
Yeah, and I'm making the point that it could be restored with or without building this building.
With all due respect, I don't.
And let me add one further point. Is there really gonna be a house here and nobody's wanna go from that house to the water?
Well, that's a matter for you to condition. There's no footpath proposed.
Do we have enough information?
Well, I heard you ask for a number of things you want us to submit.
And
We've
we've asked
for
for
cases.
other things for them to submit.
Yeah,
Is there
drywall.
revisions in the plan?
All right.
What revisions in the plan?
10-foot, he's gotta figure out how he's gonna do that. It's up to you.
You wanted detail on dry wells,
Dry well, that can be submitted afterwards.
copies of the cases, and rain barrel.
For the rain barrel.
The
I think
clarification.
you understood.
I understood what it was. I didn't.
Can he enter, put the case into the, you can put your case record in
You
within
know
the
what,
next.
Madam Chairman, the case is cited, we can get a copy of the record
Yeah.
for the board, it's cited, it doesn't necessarily need to be submitted during a hearing.
Right.
If the
I don't
board
think we
feels
need
you
a
wanna
condition.
close
I
it,
don't think we need
it's
a-
cited, we can
unless
look
you-
it up.
Unless you want a
We
continuance.
would ask for a continuance.
For what?
To digest the comments of the boards and decide whether we want to submit anything.
It's up to the board.
Well, for instance, you asked a question about nitrogen loading calculations, which to me means someone's curious about what the nitrogen loading calculations are.
I don't
Just
need
ask.
the nitrogen, I don't need the nitrogen loading calculations. You made the argument that it's the worst-case scenario, that the septic system is gonna flow in directly into the pond.
Right, but the administrator had asked the question, so that led me to believe that perhaps she wanted nitrogen loading calculations.
And I would add to that, Betsy, you said that you put in a piece of information regarding the DEP assessment of the water body, which I haven't yet seen, and I think you were making,
You've never seen the Mass DEP reports?
not particular to this water body, I've seen the reports, I know what they are, but I'd like to look at them because it seemed to me that your line of logic was that you were making an argument that the septic system is going to be further impairing the water body, and that our mitigation didn't address that, and I want to look at that and possibly respond to that.
Madam Chair,
Yep.
I would like to move that we grant a continuance until such and such a date, at your request. What's the nearest date?
Jen?
Back on July 10th, would that be okay?
That's fine with me, Brian. You want to come back on July 10th?
At the request of the applicant, I move that we continue this hearing until the 10th of July.
Second?
Any further questions? Any questions from the audience?
Just
Okay.
to let the board know, you already have 3 continuances on July 10th, so that's for all my consultants out in the audience.
And just, if I might make a comment right here. I personally, I mean, I have some,
Courtney,
like-
continued it.
yeah, like several of us, we have opinions about this, but I think it's a courtesy to the applicant.
Oh, yeah, we're continuing it till July 10th.
Okay, motion and second on the table to continue to July 10th. Chance for any final words? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Unanimous, so moved.
Good night.
Now, all of this.
Burns up by one?
Okay, next
Peter, why don't you
is
try to just
Comcast,
start
which
now?
is continued to, oh boy, July 10th.
What, yeah. That's why I said you already have 3 continued on July 10th, so I'll have to monitor your schedule carefully.
Yep.
I will.
Okay, request, oh, this is why you're here?
Yes.
Request to amend the existing order of conditions. Anthony and Jody Karinsich, 90 Hamlin Avenue. Request to amend existing order of conditions, DEP 253700, to construct a wooden stairway and stone steps to Weeks Pond to install native mitigation planning and the associated clearing, excavating, and landscaping.
Madam Chairman, I'm going to be right back. I have to run down to the office. I feel fully confident that the board can handle the walkway.
Okay, you don't have any questions?
No.
You already have a question? You want to give it
No.
an
Just a
announcement?
quick
He's giving a
update.
score update. I'm
Just
getting
a
information.
moment.
For those of you who might be interested in the score of the Bruins Blackhawks game, at the end of the second period, or almost the end, it's 2-1 Boston.
All right,
Now.
welcome, Tom.
Thank you.
Now we can listen.
Breathe easier now. For the record, my name is Tom Bunker with BSS Design. Prepared this plan. It's an amendment to an order of conditions which was granted in October of 2010. I didn't bring the entire plan with me, but that was for a tear down and rebuild of a house. This is the existing house here, and Hamlin Ave is up in this location. And Anthony Karinsich, I've been down and talked to your staff about this project, and we've drawn on these stairs. And in the last hearing, we say there's a house, people want to access the resource area of the pond. This is a very steep bank. See, it's from elevation pond and your elevation 7 or so.
Yeah.
13-foot drop. In the original, the narrative of the original notice, I know that there's trash and debris along that. It's obviously a filled slope, probably from when they built the house originally, and pushed some debris down there. It's not supporting, at the moment, supporting very good vegetated layer in that area. And it's precarious to walk on. You can see these steps now, they don't actually go over the water body, and you want to make sure that you didn't have to get into things about going in a pier or going into the water body, but it's just down to the edge. They can walk down the steps, probably tie a kayak or bring a kayak down the steps, but there's not a pier to tie boats up to. Just occurred to me that a family, one thing I don't show on here, they have kids that don't show a gate on there, but they probably like to amend the plan to show a gate on the top of the steps. I'm not asking for a continuance for that one. But part of this, there's mitigation proposed and approved on the prior plan, and so this is displacing some of that mitigation, so the calculations there have the 3-to-1 mitigation for the surface area of the steps, and moving the mitigation
prior mitigation over, and that doesn't quite fill up the whole bank. They actually, as I note in here on the notes, that they, with Prince Sitges, intend to revegetate the whole bank. Because it's, it's the right thing to do. They're environmental, they like it, and they want it to look nice.
It's not necessarily the right argument for us right now. Not everybody always does the right thing to do.
Not everybody, no.
Not everybody.
But they're going to go beyond what's required.
Okay.
I'm not showing it on the plans, but they do intend to do that. Vegetate. The approved mitigation is actually up on the top here. And the proposed mitigation covers this, and they do intend, with all that mitigation, they're not going to be accessing that part of the bank anyway, but they do intend to plant it. So I have the list here of some of the typicals and some of the other less common plants, the spice bush and button bush and some things which are interesting to have around the pond edge also, in addition to the viburnums and the high bush blueberries and things like that. And, generally whatever they can find, I say that's subject to the U and staff's approval to put in there. They can find available. That's the project anyway.
Okay, thanks. Tommy?
No, this looks pretty straightforward. 3-to-1 mitigation, and then they're gonna plant the rest of the bank on good faith.
No comments, no questions?
No questions.
Mario?
No bordering vegetated wetland, just inland bank? Is that?
Well, I do have a very slight one. It's a steep slope, and
Yeah.
actually this line is left over from the previous notice, and I actually didn't have the guy.
Yeah, because I noticed there's some alders, which are wetland plants, so.
Yeah, I know the alder, and there are a couple alders in there, and I do have, you see on the plan, there's some, I don't have it labeled, but there are some numbers for flags in there, just a few, because of the slope, it's just a few feet inland from the edge of the pond. And that was not labeled probably down there, but
No further questions.
Court?
May have covered this in my hearing, sorry. You admitted the methodology, hand dig them in, where they're going, and then you're gonna remove any of the fill, is that correct?
for the posts.
Yeah.
I
mean, you're not.
Certainly taking a fill out, yes. There's no machinery if possible.
No, I understand, but I mean, you dig a hole and put the stuff in there, and you're gonna probably put some loam or something else to, so stuff is gonna come out of the hole.
That will go away.
Yeah, that, as opposed to being spread around. Thank you, that's what I'm saying.
Unless there's some good, but better material, but that, loam material could be spread.
Yeah, I understand. I'm just concerned that if you, I don't wanna destroy any vegetation in the process, that's the point, or as little as possible. No other questions?
Okay.
Close the ticket under advisement.
Second.
Okay, motion and a second to close this hearing and take it under advisement. Any further questions from the board? Any questions from the audience? Any final words, Tom?
Go Bruins.
All right.
Madam Chairman, just for the record, who made the motion to
Tom and
close or
Courtney.
Tom and
second?
I second.
Okay, Tom, Courtney, one or the other, pick one.
All in favor of the motion on the table to close the hearing and take it under advisement, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Unanimous, so moved.
Thank you, Tom.
Thanks, Tom. Nice to see you.
Good to be back.
Really? Really?
Maybe not at this hour.
Yeah.
And you have a good weekend, too.
Have a good one, Tom.
Enforcement issue, Alex Begian, Eccles Road, map 36-06-000-007, property of Richard Thornton, Falmouth, Massachusetts, for digging, clearing, and altering wetland resources and in buffer to resource areas as defined in FWR 10.00 and 310 CMR 10.00. Jen?
Yes, Madam Chairman, if you open the file in front of you, there's a series of photos in there. It's fairly straightforward enforcement order. Mr. Bijan even has a little,
Oh, there
he
we are.
has him up. Mr. Bijan was building a set of staircase with a viewing platform and a smaller set of staircase, a staircase down a steep coastal bank. In between, basically the property is at the end of Cape Cod, in between Cape Cod Road and Beckles Road on the water of Buzzards Bay. Mr. Bijan was building a staircase down the coastal bank, a viewing platform at the top of that coastal bank, and then further inland, another set of staircase to help traverse the topography of an already mowed path in that area. This work was being done without a permit, and the work is being done on the property of Richard Thornton, and they were unaware of it as well. I know that Mr. Bijan has stated that he has easement rights. This board does not get into the easement issue. I explained that to Mr. Bijan, that the easement issue is outside of this board's purview, and that we're strictly looking at this as unpermitted work in a protected resource area.
Did you explain to Mr. Bijan that even if he came in for a permit, he would still need permission from the person who owned the land?
Correct, and that's an easement thing, and that's between the property owners.
Do you understand that?
There are some other things. I mean, the staircase is, and Tom, you can probably tell, Tom, Courtney, and Tommy, probably Mike can tell, like, just looking at it, it's not built up to code of any other staircase I've seen our building commissioner allow down a coastal bank. So although it's a lovely structure, it might be quite hazardous. So at this point, the staff is recommending the removal of the staircase and the platform, the immediate stabilization of that bank, because the bank is fairly steep, and we don't want any erosion onto the area, the resource area, the coastal beach down below, and the area to be restored with native vegetation. Yeah, so that's the staff's recommendation.
Okay, and this enforcement order would be against Mr. Thornton with the understanding that we know who performed the work?
The property
And
owner is Mr. Thornton.
Bijan
We would
also?
issue a joint enforcement order to both Mr. Bijan, because he was the one doing the work. We came across him out in the field, so we're aware of the person doing the work, and also the property owner, to preserve any of the property owner's rights as well.
Right, which has happened
Yes,
several
in the
other
past,
occasions.
yes. So that's the staff's recommendation at this point.
Courtney?
I will get the ball rolling by putting a motion on the table to accept staff's recommendation to issue an enforcement order in this situation.
Second.
Okay.
Oh, yes, Mr. Bijan,
You can.
they put a
We-
motion
we
on the
put a
table.
motion on the
and then they
table,
got-
Process
and then-
it in.
Okay, just
No,
wanna,
we know you're standing there, so.
Okay, and probably before anybody else might have questions?
First of all, I just want to keep a look at this diagram, if you don't have it, it just shows you that there is a right-of-way between north of lot 91, and that's really what we're dealing with right here, and that's pretty much the area that I was building the stairs right in here, just like there's a right-of-way here, there's one right here.
Okay,
And
well, we,
just want you to.
okay, this has to go in the record. And, sir, you have to
Yes.
introduce yourself
Okay.
to the wider audience.
Yes, my name is Alex Beach, I'm from Needham, Mass. I live at 53 Cape Carter Road. First of all, I just want to say that I humbly apologize to the Conservation Commission and anyone else that was affected by my actions on placing stairs and a small platform in the area of the right-of-way north of lot 91. My actions were not performed in a malicious or vindictive manner, but in a manner that would produce enjoyment and safety to the residents and the surrounding community. After walking the right-of-way for several years, the bluff at the edge of the right-of-way was eroding over time. At first, I placed natural rocks to get up and down the cliff, but my wife was leery about going up and down, and she slipped several times. It was then that I decided to
to construct a safe descent. I have to say, the stairs was just not built for my wife, but the main intent was to gain access to the water for those individuals who wanted to use the right-of-way. It was built for the benefit of the community at large, to enjoy the beauty and the serenity of the ocean. It was such a beautiful spot, and I'm sure all of you can agree, by sitting down and just enjoying that moment is priceless. Let me talk to you a little bit about the stairs that were fabricated. The right-of-way is at a mark 25 feet from the boundary line north of Lot 94. The stairs are placed in a zone that was void of vegetation over pre-existing footstones that was placed earlier. Actually, complete care was taken not to disrupt any vegetation, and even had the stairs skewed strategically to avoid vegetation. The stairs were built with 3 2x12 pressure-treated stringers that were reinforced and supported. The stairs are non-maintenance grade synthetic decking material that is perfect for outdoors. The platform is made by a 2x8 cinder block in an open area of no growth. It was a landing area at the top. There was no growth, just grass, and that's where the deck was placed. Within a month, vines and vegetation will fill the perimeter and encroach the stairs and landing. I was planning on putting a 2-seat bench where one can rest and look over the water, or just place a towel on it for a quick dip. I'm a very simple guy. I enjoy the area, and I enjoy the community that I'm in, and the serenity of the area. I think removing the stairs would be a severe disservice to not only to myself, but to the community and people that want to use the right-of-way. As it is right now, there is no access to the beach. The right-of-way goes down and there's a cliff right there, and there's no way to get down. And these stairs were strategically placed so that at least one can walk down to the ocean and traverse to Wood Neck Beach, or just to go for a swim. I think the stairs provide, number one, safety. They spent a lot of time to construct these stairs, and even though they may not need code, they're made without any disruption to the land. There's no footings, but it's supported on rock, and it's supported above to the decking. So it's very, 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 very strong. If we want to improve the stairs by speaking with the building department to add railings, I am all for that. I will do anything that is possible or that is required to get the stairs in working order or in its safety. The stairs also provide access. It allows passage in a safe manner to get down to the ocean. And most importantly, it serves the community, for the people in the Sipawissa community and those that want to walk their dogs and just enjoy the area. So again, I'm going to say, now I'm not sure where the boundaries are. If I was on Mr. Thornton's property, I apologize, and we can make arrangements to move it if he wants to, or if it needs to be moved. But that was the main consent of the stairs.
Okay, do you understand the process of applying for a permit?
Yeah, I do, but it was such at the time, it was such an innocuous procedure, I didn't think a permit was really, I wasn't putting footings in or anything, it was resting right on. And I didn't realize that a permit would
activity.
be necessary.
I mean, you were here for the earlier project about the beach.
Yeah,
It's-
I
it's-
know that, right.
Yeah, it's any activity
All right,
within
I
our
realize that now.
jurisdiction.
I realize that now.
And you might not have cut vegetation, but I visited that several weeks before Jen saw you there, and I saw trees, not our definition of tree, but
There are other photographs, Madam Chairman, that I have that actually
of
shows the area.
vegetation that was cut, and that platform was cut into the top of the coastal bank.
Yeah, there's a
And I
very-
do believe, Jen, that this
There's a
is,
nice picture of my coffee cup sunk into there, so.
is this coastal bank, we don't have a plan here, but is it within the velocity zone?
I would almost guarantee it. I can't say for sure, but
I think
I don't have
going up
anybody
and
here
down
that's
those
gonna be able
stairs,
to tell me.
going up and down that bluff causes more of an erosion problem, and I think those stairs are actually protecting it because you're.
Sir,
resting
it
on
may
the bottom
be,
and the top.
it may be that you could come before this board, as long as you had the proper permission
Right.
from whoever owned the land. Even if it's a right-of-way, somebody owns the land, and to build any structures, you need permission of the person.
Well, I apologize-
Right of way
I
just means you
apologize-
can
I apologize
pass.
for that, and I'll do whatever I can to rectify or improve the situation.
But, you know, depending on, we would need to know whether it's, if you say that the bank is eroding, it may be eroding. You know, you may be here at times of the year when the weather's relatively gentle, but that area can get quite large waves, and it may be that it's in an area that gets impacted by large waves. So we would have to review any project that came before us, whether to allow a staircase in that area.
Madam Chairman, most of the properties along the Cape Cod Road, where the revetment is along a road, that is the velocity zone. So I can almost guarantee this
Yeah,
area is
well,
the
we-
velocity zone, and that staircase has no footings. It's just in the bank. First big coastal storm is gonna rip that staircase right out of that bank. So again,
So, I mean,
did you just say so what?
I mean.
Sir.
Yeah, I mean,
Staff's recommendation stands.
What she's saying is, there's a storm, and those pieces of wood, or it's a composite fiber, right?
right, it's composite fiber.
If that gets destroyed in a storm, which it easily could,
Yeah.
then it's not only gonna,
I know, but.
Eliminate that.
But a storm can destroy a house, it can
Yeah,
destroy
but-
anything. I mean,
but at that, pieces like that floating around, they're gonna impact other people's property as well. So
Courtney's gonna-
it may be
right.
that you could have access here, I don't know. It would have to be, someone would have to look into it, see what the resources are, see whether it is an eroding coastal bank. But you can't just go to an area and
start
build something.
building.
Courtney?
It's already been stated, but I think needs to be restated. I appreciate your presentation, and I appreciate what you've done, and maybe what you've done is, from a standpoint of construction, not a bad thing. We're not here to pass judgment on that at this point. We're not here to discuss easements or property rights or anything. We're here to talk about the resource area and so on. And this situation, it's rather ironic, the juxtaposition between this enforcement hearing and the previous amended order discussion, where the applicant came before the commission to ask permission to put stairs down into Morse Pond, or whatever the little pond is. Yeah, and then he also detailed out mitigation and all of that. So he followed the channels correctly. So if we go and say to you, naughty, we're going to issue an enforcement order, but it's okay. You didn't follow the rules, but we're going to let you do it. What do we say to the previous applicant who followed the rules? I don't buy it. As far as I'm concerned, it's pretty simple. Out it goes. Then come in front of us, do the restoration, then come back in front of us, done the engineering, the studies, the blah, blah, and get an application in to do what you want. And if it meets the regulations, then we'll permit it with conditions. It's as simple as that. But we'll start by saying, out. I honestly don't, I'm sorry if you're not aware of the regulations, but that's not my problem. And it's not the commission's problem, it's your problem.
That's fine, it's just, it gets to be, this was a very simple project, just to get up and down the embankment.
I understand, I'm not discussing whether it's simple or elaborate or anything about it. It was, my friend, it was done without the consent of the commission. That's the issue, and the issue is we're gonna vote an enforcement order, and I support the concept of having you remove it and restore it before we go any further. If you wanna come back after that, fine, be our guest.
Chances are I may not. It may be costly for me to put up a structure, footings and everything. This was, I had materials and stuff, I spent a modest amount.
Well, you know, I'm sorry you did.
That's all I'm gonna be.
You know, but
Thank you.
you did it without permission.
Madam Chairman, I believe there's a motion on the floor.
There is.
But I'd like to,
Yeah, no. Did Jen want to say something else? Okay. Tom?
I do appreciate, I don't think, and I truly believe you, no malice and all that.
No, it wasn't meant to really, I didn't mean to go on the Fort's property, and there's no.
And I believe you,
delineation
but I
where-
want to inform you of something. The footings that are not there, you have exposed yourself to such a liability that one of the reasons we have a building code is that you have inspections, and it relieves you of obligations of liability. If it meets a performance standard in the code, and someone trips and falls, your liability is minimized. You have exposed yourself.
And the property owner.
As an individual, you have highly exposed yourself with this, okay? All the other components and such, no pointing at your craftsmanship or that. But when you don't anchor things and you don't have them secured, why do you think, this is, if I have to cross these hurdles, certainly, I'm not asking you to do anything that I personally have not had to do multiple times. And sometimes projects that I'd like to do around my own home, I can't, because I don't have the money and the resources to go and apply for permitting and things like that. You have to budget it. Unfortunately, you put the cart before the horse, okay? And all the other things. I'm worried for you for liability. You really have exposed yourself to something like that. And this enforcement order, the stairs will come out, okay? Because they're not to code, right? You gotta, I hope you truly appreciate that. You wanted to do something simple. Unfortunately, we live in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. To do any kind of building is not simple anymore. We are regulated. I'm speaking as a builder. We are regulated like holy poop. You just, it's not arbitrary. There are performance standards that we have to meet. You're close, but it's not
Well, let me ask you
satisfactory.
something, can footings be placed?
I'd like, if I could go there and look at it, I've only seen photographs.
Not at this point in time.
I'm going to agree with that, not at this point in time. There is gonna have to be removal of things, so that you can, I'd have to see the structure to see how it was assembled. You may be able to take components apart and not have a trashed out thing, but all that is in the future. You have to get there first. You have to be able to know who, what, where, when, and why before you can put something back on the bank.
And go the next step.
That's what I
No,
mean
go
by
the
that.
next step about, you're
We
the
don't even know
Conservation
who's-
Commission.
Yes.
We don't even know whose property
That's-
yet.
Yeah.
You have to know, exactly where the property lines
Well, I
are,
don't know
exactly know.
Who knows where that is? I mean,
The
That's why you
engineers-
hire an engineer.
Well,
All
This-
the
Actually,
engineers that
Mass
work here.
professional land surveyor.
Yeah, the previous young man, the couple that did this, I saw them come in when they originally came to the board to do the house project. And these stairs, and I'm pretty sure you can see the footings that are established at the top,
Yeah.
and then all the way down. And the handrails, they had to get an engineer, and they did that, on their own property. They knew where this is. I've done a series of unfortunate events.
And you need to know exactly what the resources are. I mean, we know it's on a coastal bank. We need to know what type of coastal bank, because that's gonna impact how, if we do permit stairs, how those stairs will be attached to that bank. Tommy?
Did you put that together with screws, all that decking?
No, I had a contractor would make it, or master carpenter would kind of advise me on how to do it. And we
And so-
actually, when we made
A
the
builder
strings
from
on that,
Franklin.
the stringers,
Yeah.
we did it, we hand cut it to get the exact angulation of the slope, so we didn't really impact.
Yeah, my question was just if you thought you could take it apart, that might be one good way to do it. If you think there's a chance that you can
I could take it
hook up
apart.
with your neighbors and get their permission and then come back for a permit, it doesn't look to me like you're that far off. So that, you're saying that maybe you don't have the money to take it out and put it back in, you could possibly save all the materials if you put it together with screws. But if you coiled that, nailed that, that's not gonna
The only
happen.
problem is.
That was my only.
I appreciate that. The only problem is that the stairs are located in such a spot that's been traversed, and that's the spot that is the best access to get down to the beach. You know, if you go to the right, you're into more coastal vegetation. And I didn't want to really impinge on that and cut away on that, and I just wanted to use the area that I thought was the best spot that impacted the vegetation the least amount, and that's
It was just a suggestion, so maybe you could save your materials, that was
Well,
it.
that's.
Yeah,
would
he's
probably
suggesting
take-
you save your materials. I'm suggesting you get someone to figure out where that is in terms of the right-of-way, who owns the land where the right-of-way is. And get
Madam
that.
Chairman, that'll be detailed out. The next step, Mr. Bijan, and this board is going to close this hearing, and they're going to issue you an enforcement order. And the enforcement order is going to detail out what needs to be done. And one of the requirements in every enforcement order this board issues is a plan. So you'll need to get a plan. There could be one on record already. You need to get a plan. We need to know where this is. That needs to be removed. And as soon as that is removed, as soon as that is taken off site, you need to stabilize that slope. But that will be detailed out to you, and that will be sent to you.
Well,
Okay?
nothing was done to the slope. The slope was as it is.
Sir, if, as Courtney said, I was not able to view that slope prior to you putting it in. That area is disturbed. That's what I can see today. That is what I saw the other day when I went out there. And before I saw you out there, I went out there, there was a photograph of that platform dug into the top of that coastal bank, dug in, and you can clearly see and I drink a lot of coffee, so I had one of those extra large Dunkin' Donuts coffee cups, and it was sunk all the way into that thing. So, I mean, to say you just placed it on there, there was some removal of
It was cut.
vegetation cut
It
into
was
that
cut
thing.
into-
That was made with a lot of care to make it.
I understand, but-
To make it so people wouldn't trip and they would walk right onto it. It was done
Yep,
with a
no,
lot
I
of
understand, you explained that in the
care
field.
and
This board is gonna issue most likely an enforcement order, and as I said, everything will be detailed out. And once you receive it, there'll be a time frame in order to get the work done.
It's fine, it's not a big deal to remove it. The
It's-
issue was not to remove the
Sir,
structure.
it's gonna be beyond just removing it. You're going to need to restore the bank, which we are going to need to monitor. So,
And the top of the bank.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, the bank was the way it was.
and I'm sorry, sir, I don't have that evidence.
Courtney.
My colleague, Tom, and myself have come at this issue from slightly different angles. Tom and I are both in the construction business when we're not doing this. I'm looking at it from the standpoint of the regulations. Tom is looking at it from the building point. Both of these are relevant. And you've got to listen carefully now. We're going to give you an enforcement order that deals with the immediate issue, which is the removal of the stairs and the restoration of the area. So that has to be done. We're not discussing the merits or lack thereof of what you had proposed. Now, you can at that point choose to come back to the commission for permission to do what you did before without permission. I know that seems redundant, but now you gotta take it out, now you put it back, and so on, but, had you come in front of us in the first place, it wouldn't be this redundancy. or expense, or your hassle, or our time. However, what do you need to do? What you need to do is to hire a civil engineer who's conversant with the regulations, who also can determine exactly where the property lines go, who can determine if there's a right-of-way, whatever that is, can properly stake it, can properly lay out the route you want to take to put your path and your stairs and your platforms and whatever else you're going to do. And he puts it on a plan. You may need to hire an engineer as well to design the actual structure so that it meets the building code, which goes to Tom's point, which relieves you ultimately of some liability if it's done according to code. So you do all that. Now I realize that that's going to deal with expense, but you're going to be in a process, you're going to discover things. Is this a velocity zone? What can you do in a velocity zone? That's where a good engineer, and there are plenty of good ones in this town, we see them every day, can give you a guidance on you know, what the regulations will allow you to do and what they won't, and that may influence the design of what you do. In the end, you may achieve exactly what your original goal was, which is to have a structure, a pathway, and so on down this thing to allow yourself and others, if that's the case, to access that area. We're not opposed to that. We're only saying, you've got to do it right. So the two steps are, you're going to get an enforcement order, you've got to comply with it. Removing what's there, restoring it, and that restoration process will have to be a matter of discussion. They'll be detailed here, but then you can get it clarified through our administrator. Then the next step is, should you decide to go for it because you think it's a good thing, and obviously you wouldn't have done it in the first place if you didn't, then you go about getting a civil engineer and a surveyor to do that part of it that relates to determining where it goes, how it should go, and how it complies with the regulations. And then an structural person to design it so that it can get a building permit. And then you go through that process. That's all we're trying to say to you. That's all I'm saying to you, even though I may have raised my voice and sounded grumpy and want to beat you over the head, but that's all part of my job.
I'm going to say, you said enough now.
Part of your
I
charm,
think-
Courtney, it's part of your charm.
About it is,
Sir,
Sir, there's
We
really
don't-
nothing else to say.
I appreciate all the comments, and I would take that advice, it's very good.
Thank you.
But this is a right-of-way which is 4 houses down from where I live.
And that
Okay.
staircase has been there
And
for
this
multiple
staircase,
years.
this right-of-way, other than myself, I don't think anyone has ever been on this right-of-way or down this staircase. Because it's just not a conducive place to sit, it's not a conducive place, and you are encroached on your neighbor to your right, your neighbor to your left, and people feel very uninhibited going there. They feel very alienated, they feel like they're looked upon. So, you know, I mean,
Sir, we have a motion and a second on the table
okay,
Indeed.
I mean, I'm just,
to issue an enforcement order. We understand and we sympathize with your desire for yourself and to help your neighbors get to the beach, but it has to be done correctly. Are there any other questions before we? Michael, make it very, very short.
You know how we feel about easement issues, Mr. Eater?
I will make it as long as it needs to be, but I will be pretty short.
Michael, we don't want to hear anything about
You're
easement.
not gonna hear
Easements.
anybody. You won't.
Wetlands Protection
You won't
Act,
hear about easements. You
Falmouth
won't hear
Wetlands
You
Bylaw.
won't hear any of those things. Well, let me tell you what you will hear, let me tell you. Sorry, but I mean, let's go. All I wanted to say.
Mr.
is-
Eater, you
Yep,
need to
tell us who
introduce
you are.
yourself.
Michael Eater, I wanted to say this right-of-way he's referring to is just another one of the right-of-ways on the Haynes subdivision plan from 1896 that, as you know, is something I've been quite concerned about over the years. Obviously, I agree with the board, things have to be done right. I just wanted to point out that this is something that the neighborhood is watching and eager about. I think there's, I've talked a little bit to Attorney Ahmed and Attorney Wall. There are a lot of parties involved here, as there have been in other right-of-way issues here, and access and work done issues. And it'd be nice to have a little time just to hopefully we can come back to the board. I was asked what the timeframe on.
There's
this.
nothing for us to come back for the board now. This isn't
I'm asking.
a simple enforcement
Let me
issue
finish
which
what I'm
we're
saying.
prepared
Let me finish what I'm
to
saying.
vote.
Can you let me finish what I was gonna say? I just wanna know from a process point what the timeframe is, so I have an idea of when we could get the parties together and talk to you about some of these
Madam Chairman.
options we're thinking about.
Madam Chairman, I can handle this. Timeframe. Mr. Bijan will be issued an enforcement order by June 26th. In that timeframe, he will have approximately
1 month.
30 days to remove the staircase, restore the bank, restore the area that the platform is in. At that time, if all the parties over there wants to get together and figure out the easement issue and come back with a staircase, that's fine, but the area is going to have to be restored first, and all of you who are hoping for a staircase down that bank, better just cross your fingers that that area is not in the velocity zone. And I understand.
I mean, the only thing, I'm just trying to clarify the process.
Yep, no, that's
There's a
the
lot of-
process, so
there-
from
there
this
is-
point,
there is
it's like
other
6
rights of way
weeks.
nearby. I don't know the value of this thing, I just,
Yep.
question, if we got something before you that you could look at, it would come.
6
in
to 8
front.
weeks from this point,
Okay.
8 weeks being the latter month,
Sounds great.
you know, the longest I would let this go on.
And the only thing I will say is, I've used both those right-of-ways a lot.
Well, that's good.
We have no
And thank you for
problem
not bringing up
if
easements.
people are
No.
legally using rights of way. It's nice for people to get
It's
to the
nice
beach.
for people to access the water.
Never mind, that wasn't one thing.
Why you still like
Certainly
that?
myself, and attorney, I've seen Dr. Bijan, I don't know, Dr. Bijan. He has an attorney's opinion that he has an ownership interest in this. I want to remind the board that, I agree, we should not get into, those are for
We
courts to
don't.
deal with. And so if someone
Thank you.
says you have a right to do something and that's fine.
Even though people like to drag us in kicking and screaming into easement rights issues, we shy away from
We'll
this.
do that.
Bob,
I think we'll be in there.
Oh, Mr. Arnold.
I do have one piece of
you
information.
have to tell us who you are, though.
Yes, I'm Bob Hunt, I'm an attorney, and I represent Phil Fine and Karen Coburn, who own the right-of-way, and they also own a lot next door to the right-of-way, the other side of it from Thornton property. We do have a survey prepared by BSS Design which shows the location of the path and the stairs, so we know where it is. It's not on the right-of-way.
Bob,
It
do you
is
have another
relevant.
copy of that with you tonight? I
think,
know you gave me one already, I think I scribbled on it, that's why.
I'm not sure how, I'll give you a copy as long
Thank
as
you.
I know I can get a copy of it from you if I need it.
Oh, no, if you bring it to me, I'll make a copy and keep it. Okay,
I will do that.
thank you.
But I think it's relevant that you know that a previous owner in 1990, a previous owner of the property that Dr. Beechan owns, someone named John Chernin, applied for a permit to install a set of stairs. There's a nice set of plans that I have a copy of, submitted to the Conservation Commission in 1990, and he was denied permission to put stairs down the bank. And I believe it's fair to say that the regulations are only more difficult today. And regardless of whether or not there is a right-of-way, the right-of-way in any case would not include the right to build a structure such as would be required and such as was denied. Anyway, I have a copy of the determination of applicability that was issued November 30, 1990, which was a denial. Well, that is, it was a positive.
It was for an RDA.
It was an RDA, Bob.
What's that?
It was an RDA, it wasn't a notice.
Yes, it was the
So an RDA, which would mean that if they were gonna do it, they'd have to come in for a notice, which we've explained to you.
That's right. Okay, and I
Yeah,
hope it's understood
that's a
that
little
you-
different than a denial, it's just simply
Yeah.
saying.
Yes.
it
A
determines
positive
that
with
the
an RDA
Wetlands
does
Act
not mean a
does work.
denial.
An applicant, yeah.
Usually.
Somebody can ask if they can do something, and sometimes we say, yes, you can do it because it's not gonna impact the resource. But sometimes we say, no, we're not gonna let you do it, but you can come back and have a notice of intent, and then we'll evaluate how it might impact the resource and condition it properly. So when Attorney Ahmet just said that, it doesn't, I don't know that you will get permission, I don't know that you won't get permission, but you have to come with a notice of intent.
The only concern I have with your order is clear that people, you're going to order that work be done on the bank, that work be done in resource areas. At this point, work has to be done. I think that the way the work is done, just to correct the problem, is subject to your regulation, and you need to be sure exactly how it's done and who's going to do it.
Oh, that will be
That will
detailed.
be
It'll
detailed
be a
in the-
restoration plan.
That'll be detailed in
It'll
the-
have to be, there'll have to
Right.
be permission from the property owner, who I know is represented here as well. Again, that'll be issued to both Mr. Bijan, and unfortunately, we do have to issue it to Mr. Thornton, but that'll just protect all the parties' rights as well. You crafted a bit differently, but.
Just didn't want Dr. Beecham to be under the impression that when it's being called
Oh, no.
next weekend and
No,
start
Miss-
doing work.
No, you
No,
shouldn't do
absolutely
anything
not.
until you get this order.
Oh.
Brian.
It's a night for you, Brian.
I'm getting tired too. I'll be very brief. I represent the owners of what's been referred to as the Thornton property. I really can't add anything to what's been said tonight, but similar to what Attorney Ahmed said, we have concerns about the plan because it's obviously going to be on my client's property.
Absolutely.
So if I could ask, could we have a copy of whatever order is issued, be sent to us? And could we be notified of any further hearings?
You have to give permission.
Brian, we're gonna send you
For
an order,
this.
and we'll probably address it to your client as well, just as I said, to protect all the rights.
Great. I'm just asking because I didn't get a copy of the first letter, and so I just want to make sure.
No,
I'm part
didn't
of the
I
process.
even,
No, I didn't get it.
I thought I scanned it, and I thought I sent it, I know I sent it to you,
You said
Brian.
you were going, it's probably an oversight, and I'm not being critical, I just want to make sure that I'm part of the process moving forward. And normally, the enforcement order issues and says coming with a claim that then is subject to further approval.
I think I have an extra
And I just
copy.
wanna be part of that. And lastly, the last comment is that in the findings, if the board would be so kind as to include the finding of staff's observations of who did the work. Just the letter that I did see made it very clear that Jennifer saw Mr. Beecham and other individuals.
Brian, here are 2 copies of the letters that I scanned, and I apologize, I scanned them in myself,
Yeah, no,
when I sent them to you.
I wasn't
There you go.
being critical, I just, I didn't.
And that actually states that Mark and I witnessed it.
Okay, that makes him culpable. I don't want to get into this. I'm tired, and I'm going to call for the vote, because I think we've beat this thing to death.
Yeah,
Peter?
I'm just getting upset. He's doing a T-vote too. Quickly,
Peter
Mr.
Wasdorf,
Walter.
President of the Civil Wizard Association, although it's not the concern of this board, I want to not let Mr. Ahmed's claim that Mr. Fine owns that right of way go unopposed. We dispute that.
Thank you.
It's an unnumbered lot. Somebody else owns it.
There's a motion and a second on the table to close this enforcement hearing with the taking staff's recommendation. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Unanimous, so moved.
Madam Chairman, we'll take the orders up next week.
Well, then we're to other business. Anybody want to make a motion to adjourn?
No orders today.
Nope.
I'll move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
The score
All
is still 2-1.
opposed? Any abstention? One abstention on
One
the vote.
abstention.
On the vote.